Hey everyone, it's Valerie De La Rosa, the chair for CB2 Reopening Working Group. We will begin in just a minute, so please sit tight. All right, it's 6:35, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I think everyone from the committee is here, if I'm thinking correctly. I don't see Bob Ely, though. Okay, I do see him. Great. Okay. All right.
Valerie, I still have a screen share up. It says.
Oh yeah, I know.
Oh, you know. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
No.
I'll just stop sharing right now. Hi, my name is Valerie De La Rosa. This is Manhattan Community Board 2 Reopening Working Group. We are doing a follow-up on the open restaurants and open streets restaurants programs, which were announced as being made permanent. There's by the mayor a few weeks ago, and there is some legislation in City Council that's going to actually enact that into law, and so that's why. So there are pieces of legislation. I will link those below in the chat in just a little bit. And we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go back to the screen share. So just 1 second. And we'll quickly go through the So quickly, going through the agenda, I think I'm like a minute or 3 minutes off. I've called this meeting to order. I'm going to kind of quickly, I'll let Carter speak in just a second, but I'll quickly go into why we're meeting tonight. I think it goes, we've had, as you know, when this committee first formed in June, one of our first points of order was to give the community a say on the open, and give the community, both residents and operators, a say on the open restaurants program. We did that with a 22-page letter that included several addenda, which I will also link into the chat in just a little bit. I think it goes without saying that the open restaurants program and the open streets restaurant program have been a much needed injection of economic vitality for our neighborhood, but with that also comes quality of life, public health, public safety, all of which cannot be compromised. So I've received, the board office has received a lot of letters, comments. Thank you to everyone for everything that you've submitted in. I know that some of you will be testifying tonight, and I very much look forward to that. This program is not a success without your input. So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for filling out the CB2 open restaurants survey, as well as the for both residents, and there's also a separate one for operators. I'll be sharing some of those results tonight as part of my presentation, and we will, just to quickly go over the agenda, I'll let Carter say a few words in just a second, but we'll do an overview of the existing program quickly. Just for reference, I'm not going to read everything on the slides, but I do have a reference in there, just the different guidelines, so that we can use them as talking points throughout the discussion. We'll also have the preliminary results, as I just said, and then an introduction and discussion of T2020-6655, and I will link that into the chat in just a bit, but that is actually the overview bill, which was on the agenda, has actually now been moved as of today. The Business Licensing Committee moved that into moved T2020-6656 into this new bill. So all of that has moved into this, and it's about this program. And so then after that, we'll go into public testimony. We'll start with residents first, and then go through operators, community groups, and then committee members from this committee and other CB2 board members. I kind of just colloquially, quickly, before I let Carter speak, I would just say that everything, all of the feedback from operators and from residents all kind of centers around the 2 E's, which are enforcement and education. Enforcement of the current guidelines and education of the what the guidance is. There's a lot of key pieces of the current updated guidance that has not been issued yet, and not having that communication for residents or for operators, it comes at a business cost and it comes at a quality of life cost. So with that, I'll let Carter Booth, the chair of Community Board 2, say a few words.
So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight. The outdoor dining programs, the different programs, have been an incredible success for businesses. It's something that people were looking forward to. We spent some time on this in June, submitted a letter with our recommendations, but with that success, there have also been some bumps in the road. It's amazing the job that DOT has done in rolling out this program. I think that there are over 10,000 participants. Just to put that into perspective, and previous to this, I think there were in the vicinity of 1,800 licensed sidewalk cafes. So in the span of a very short time period, the city processed 10,000 applications for outdoor dining of one sort or another, and so it's been a phenomenal success in that regards. But as Valerie had pointed out, that there are some bumps in the road, and a lot of that has to do with the enforcement aspects and the educational component, so people know what the rules are. While the rules are widely published, they're not synthesized into one location, and that's created some angst. And hopefully, as we move forward, that's something that that can be smoothed out among a lot of the other issues that we've heard from residents. I think that tonight is a great opportunity to hear from everybody on what they think can be improved on in the current programs. Thanks.
Great. Great. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to link the new legislation below. All right. Thanks so much, Carter. Thanks, everyone. Let me just get that slide show back up for you. I know you're really anticipating this. Hopefully this will be great. So as I kind of said in my kind of opening, the lack of public input on the permanence of this program is a huge issue for CB2, specifically since we do have the highest density of sidewalk cafes and liquor licenses. That's, I know, has got a lot of residents and operators wondering where is the public input into how this is implemented from a quality of life standpoint, from a business economic standpoint. So let me just make this larger. And we also are experiencing a crisis of leadership from our elected officials and our agencies on really giving both operators and residents a clear enforcement plan. So with that, a quick overview of the programs in CB2, and I've kind of divided it into 3 areas, which is where we've been, where we are now, and where we want to be. So where we've been, all of the issues that I've received, that the board office has received feedback on as of late, both through the survey results and through emails, through the open-ended questions on the survey, they're all the issues that we raised back in June that were not addressed in how the program was shaped. So a lot of these here are issues right now still. The noise, safety, equity is on there twice, restrooms are on there twice. The noise, safety issues, restaurant worker safety, the process, accessibility, parking, etc. So where we are now, we have 893 open street restaurants in CB2. 706 of those are with alcohol service, which is no surprise. I just said that we have the highest density in the city of licenses, and 187 of those have no alcohol service. This is a map that shows kind of where those are spread out. It's pretty self-explanatory. And the existing program, just really quickly, I kind of just took what was on the DOT website and put it in here so we can use it as talking points, but I also kind of summarized from the survey results and just feedback I've received, kind of what guidance is still needed for operators and what the resident issues are. So I'm not gonna read all of the sidewalk seating. I've obviously taken out that the sidewalk seating may not exceed the business frontage because that has been changed with the update, but we'll get to that in a second. But these are all just kind of for you to see. You know, you'll see in the survey results that the #1 issue for residents is the lack of sidewalk egress. So there are operators that are not leaving that 8-foot path for pedestrians. There's sidewalk tables next to the curb and against the building. It's not clear what's allowed because there is no enforcement. On the operator side, there are no variances allowed in the current self-certification program. Lack of equity with the space, even with the lack of the, even people still have the lack of adjacent property. And the 311 complaints are not moving the needle on compliance. Again, these are all of the regulations from DOT. Again, they're just talking points that we need to go back to, so I've just put them in here. There's various things, there's nothing new here. So I'll keep going. More things from the existing program for the roadway seating. And then this is from the DOT website. As you can see on here, it's very clearly says there's no seating on sidewalk adjacent to the curb. And we do understand that operators are out there trying to make it to that next week, that next day, that next weekend. And there is seating that is happening adjacent to the curb, but it's creating a huge lack of sidewalk egress for residents. September 25th is when the program was announced being made permanent by the mayor. And with that came these updates, which are adjacent properties. So now operators can get the permission of the landlord of the adjacent property to extend their seating. As we all know, that's happened already. Again, it's survival out there for our operators. So some of them have extended to that. And I understand needing to get that space, but we're seeing a lack. So what residents are seeing a lack of enforcement on that, since that's already kind of happened. And so it's led to now that it's actually allowed, it's actually led to a whole slew of additional issues, which again include the lack of sidewalk egress, noise, and sanitation issues. We're also hearing from bids and other smaller retailers that feel left out of this process. They're completely left out of the adjacent property conversation, since that's between the landlord and the landlord of the adjacent property and the eating and drinking establishment owner. Guidance that's missing here from DOT is the adjacent property template agreement and instructions on how to file that agreement with DOT. And again, if there's no enforcement currently, there's no clear plan forward for enforcement. And so we wonder what this template agreement is really going to do. So here I've just put where the adjacent property, just to show that on the map quickly, on the drawing. Heating is another big issue. We heard a lot about this from residents as well. So as you know, electrical heaters are allowed both in the sidewalk and roadway. Propane heaters are allowed on these sidewalks only. I'm sure from walking around that we've all seen the opposite of all of that happening. And technically, the official guidance has not been released for operators on what will be considered an approved installation, yet we already know that with the weather having changed already, that there are already heaters out there. It's Hunger Games out there across the nation for restaurants to get these heaters. So we were, with a lack of leadership already from our elected officials, we've already let our operators down, and now trying to pay these high prices for the different types of heaters that are now allowed. There is a permit that will be required for the propane heaters. There's a lack of guidance here that is not helping our operators out, and it's costing our operators. And there's no communication to residents about this at all. There's a lot of concern from residents worried about why propane is now allowed to be stored next to their apartment building. And we're already seeing a lot of them already illegally in the roadway, and there's a lack of enforcement. As far as tent enclosures, those are allowed as part of this update. There's different percentages and certain, depending on how many sides are covered, it then turns into an object that needs to follow indoor dining guidelines. So there's a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration, and it's not clear how this is going to be enforced at all from a public safety standpoint. The electrical heaters are allowed in tent enclosures, both in the partial and full tent enclosure. But you know, as I said before, we are seeing propane happen as well. Residents issue, what's the enforcement plan for this? It's not clear as to what agency is going to oversee that enforcement. And I want to know in general, I think for a lot of these issues, is this going to be a complaint-driven enforcement? And I know that residents are tired. Another thing that came out that's not as clear on any site, any website, is from something I had heard at a city council meeting about tents of certain sizes being under one agency versus another. And so there's just a lot of confusion for operators into how to follow these guidelines. And another question I think needs to be discussed for our district is, how do we ensure the kind of aesthetic continuity of the historic districts that are in CB2 without compromising any sort of economic activity, of course, that are provided by there are some really nice tent structures out there, and there's some not so nice ones. And again, we don't want anything that's going to create additional red tape or put operators at at a disadvantage at all, but I think it is a question that we need to have on our minds, as this is a huge, so for something that's permanent, this is a huge change to the aesthetic landscape that I think needs to be considered. As far as roadway safety, the winterizing of our area is an issue. It also comes up with sanitation as well, but specifically the safety of how our snowplow is going to get through our narrow streets, what are the additional materials that our operators need to have now to be able to know they're going to need to maybe potentially temporarily take down a structure for snowplow, and what's that plan and how can they get ahead of it? Are there any residential stakeholders that are going to be a part of this discussion? When is the city going to have the discussion with the restaurant industry to develop these additional safety features? It's no surprise. We've definitely have gotten a surprise snowstorm in October before, and while it's most likely not going to happen at this stage, we just don't know when that first big storm is going to hit. So the other question is also, how will streets get plowed on a regular basis? I'm going to go through the survey results. I want to make sure that we get to the public testimony, so I appreciate your patience as I get through this. But the number one issue from the survey, and we had about a 66% completion rate of people who started the survey for residents. So the number one issue with outdoor dining, according to CB2 residents who took the survey, is the lack of sidewalk egress. I was personally really surprised that it was not noise, but noise is definitely up there. So just kind of quickly going to go through these. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about outdoor dining being made permanent? You can see, I won't read it to you there. Obviously, it's that number on the right is people being happy. And I don't know if happy is the right word to have been used here, but you kind of get the sense. I've seen that kind of go down as the weekend, as the results were coming in over the weekend, that number did go down, and the not happy started to rise. Oops, did I go? I might have repeated that question. So we asked, what's working with outdoor dining? And I apologize, I left some blanks in there because I was pulling this very close up to this meeting, so I apologize for the blank ones, but you can kind of see it all there. People generally, for every comment that says it's brought life back to the village, there was a lot of vibrancy, a lot of, feels like Paris, it feels like Europe, gives ambiance. When restaurant establishments follow the rules, it works with tenants regarding noise and keeping the sidewalks clean. Replaces lost restaurant capacity, however, people were quick to say, and there was definitely a lot of comments of CFOs, certificate of occupancy, that it must not be used to increase what capacity of what was already there, what was approved for liquor licenses. There were definitely some people answering this survey that are residents that were very familiar with that process. But good people generally, good operators are providing dining options. Here's some more. The limited hours are working well. Community, less isolation, vibrant city. Owners are able to make money. People are able to stay in business when all the regulations are followed, and respect from the owner and patron towards the community. And I think that's really important. The idea, the role of the patron, I think I've said that before, but the role of the patron I think is really important too, and how this is complied with. And some more, people are being employed, owners are making money, able to survive. Restaurant owners are making money, however, it is at the health risk and inconvenience of residents. Someone else put, I live on a busy street full of restaurants and the sight of a lively street makes me happy. I know that is not the case for everyone. So I'm just kind of sharing a sample. Here's what's not working. It's all over the place. Some people are, there's issues with the bike lanes. The propane heaters are taking up precious narrow sidewalk space. So even though the heaters are where they are supposed to be, also technically heaters are not supposed to be out yet because that guidance has not been issued. There's public defecation, there's cooking grease being put in the sewer. People are having to walk in the middle of the street because of that lack of sidewalk egress. Loitering patrons, where alcohol is served, the venues become very noisy. And you can kind of see the ones on the right there. They're kind of blocked by my screen, so I'll just let you read those. Noise, lots about noise. Bars are tripling their C of Os, that's certificate of occupancy. Lack of sidewalk space to walk the dog. The trash cans are overflowing. Scary for people living nearby due to the proximity of maskless patrons, noise levels. Restaurants now think they own the block with zero regard for the locals. I did hear a lot about people believing that the restaurants have been given a large amount of public space, and they want to see it treated with respect. Cars are too close to the outdoor dining. Lack of input from neighbors. Some people feel there are lower standards that now exist for licensed sidewalk cafes. People are worried about what is the emission out, what is the, if all these outdoor heaters are happening, what's the effect on climate change? Again, these are all opinions. These are not, these are opinions that people have written in. So please take it with that grain of salt. People are saying during the daytime hours, patrons are getting loud. Bad operators are not following. I just copied and pasted these. So I'm trying to take liberty with some of the shortened language here. Open late, there's no room for trash to be put out. So that's the sanitation issue, crowds, trash. How important is it, residents, for you to know what the enforcement plan is? Pretty high, 64%. People want to know what's the enforcement plan, what's the agency they need to reach out to, and what happens when you make a 311 call. A lot of people are tired. A lot of residents we're hearing from are tired from making 311 calls. They don't feel as though it's actually doing much. What neighborhood do you live in? The majority of the respondents lived in Greenwich Village and West Village, so the Village. What else do you want us to know? There's a lot. These are kind of all over the map. There's the propane comment I mentioned earlier. People are terrified by that. That should not be taken lightly. Let's see what else. I do not think this should have been made permanent without neighborhood inputs, like living in a bar. Why was this made permanent instead of putting a time limit? So there's a lot more where there's one comment like that, there was maybe another 10, 15 just like that. But please know I read them all. The operators, quickly. And the operators that we surveyed, 66% said they've entered negotiations. So you can kind of see that there. That's pretty self-explanatory. We asked what type of liquor license that they held, and we asked them what type of program they were participating in. You would have think that from all of the, what's working and how a lot of the residents said it's great to keep the businesses. That's what's working. It's giving them a lifeline. But for operators, we didn't really hear that much from what's working for them, really. So that's kind of the irony. I thought I would have had 3 slides full here, and I don't. So you can kind of see those. Again, they had a lot of what's not working. Costs, adjacent property support, landlords of adjacent properties that don't want to give up that space. The weather, again, things we can't control. Construction, you can kind of see all of that. The neighborhood, the most of the operators were located in the Village proper, and then kind of pretty even throughout that responded. And then what else do you want us to know? Again, it's kind of more a very, very dire situation. People are talking about there's more of an unhoused population on the street that is starting to impede in their outdoor dining. Business is bad. There's no office workers coming back for a while, it seems, and that has a huge impact on our operators for holiday parties, private events, and catered lunches. So I'm seeing a lot of that. The PPP loan running out. I'm going to have a slide on the different percentages of revenue that we've seen drop, but you can kind of see there it's a pretty dire situation. Yeah, people want it to be permanent. Operators want it to be permanent. Some of these are repeats. I apologize for that. There's vandalism some are experiencing, and they need better communication about the guidance. They've also asked, this is another one, a more alleviation on operating expenses, such as liquor license, renewal fees, insurance, utilities, and the alleviation of business loans. I also asked, what do you wish customers knew? So you can kind of see some of those. Again, I can't see all of them because I'm blocked by the attendee panelists, but they've asked for cooperation. They're just saying they're just trying to survive with a very small staff. They please understand it takes us longer to give you food or to get food out to you. Please wear your mask when you order. Please, we've had to raise prices. We were forced to close for months, and now we're penalized for reduced occupancy. They have higher expenses. So you can kind of see those there. I also asked, how many weeks of or months of operating capital do you have to stay in business? And so those were the kind of what we heard from. So again, it's bleak out there. 88% said they were not making a profit. Asked people if they paid October rent. Most paid partial. Some said they will be able to pay partial November rent. And then asked, what is the percentage change in employees year over year? So it's just, these are not indicative of size, like the bubble isn't bigger based on the size. Maybe if I'd had a little bit more time with it, and again, this is just preliminary results, I could do it with showing by neighborhood, but this is what we have for now. And then change in revenue year over year, and you can kind of see there kind of what, again, all over the map, where we want to be. We want equitable voices in the process that do not compromise quality of life or economic vitality. The permanence of this program with no public input has kind of put everyone on edge. Oops. We want to revisit the program's permanent duration after a set amount of time. And we want timely communication of guidance for operators with clear regulations. And we also want a communication we want the communication of and execution of a clear enforcement plan. We don't believe fines are the answer. We need more options secure for operators. I'm quickly going to go into the legislation. It's very short. I've linked it in the chat. It's a local law. So this is as I said at the top of the meeting, this bill is replacing T206656, which was linked in the agenda. So as of today, the Business Licensing Committee now moved this into this bill. So this is a local law in relation to space heaters, the establishment of a permanent outdoor dining program, and to amend local law number 77 for the year 2020 in relation to the expiration of the outdoor dining program. So really quickly, this is a really high level summary of that bill, which is extending the current program with roadway dining and allowing the use of space in areas not currently zoned where someone doesn't have a sidewalk cafe. And that would be from December 31, 2020 to September 30th, 2021. Beginning October 2021, the roadway portions of the program would become permanent. To keep using the sidewalk space, you would need a sidewalk cafe license. The administration is planning on revisiting the entire sidewalk cafe process. That is not a part of this bill, and that proposal will come out at a later time. So with that, Carter, do you have anything to add there before we go to public testimony?
No, I do not.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to move to the public testimony part of this meeting. I'm going to ask for residents that are in the attendee list to raise your hand, and I will call you in the order that you have raised your hand. I will quickly ask the reopening working group committee if you have any questions before we move forward. Just the committee. No, okay. Great. I also see, I have not looked at the chat. So if you've written in the chat, when you present, you get stuck behind this kind of wall of the presentation. So I will take a look at the chat. So I'm gonna go ahead and start calling on people. So I don't know who caller one is. That person has another hand raised. All right, we're gonna start with Pete Davies. Pete?
Okay, there we go. I'm putting in the chat. Hopefully this will load. Anyway, I was hoping to put in there a short video from the full board SLA on September 16th, where Chairman Bradley and the 3 members of the SLA clarified the hours of operation. So everybody knows. I think everybody should know that by now. 11 o'clock outside, 12 o'clock inside, 12:30 hard close, everybody out. That is the SLA saying that in conjunction with what the city has said. I'm going to give over most of my time to my friends at the South Village neighbors, but I do want to say a couple of things first. The granting of value to a property owner through permanency here is you got to think about the equity of that. This is all of a sudden that property, every property that has a restaurant becomes far more valuable. It also, anything about using neighboring property, that property becomes more valuable. So you just got to think about that equity there. Also, I'm not hearing anything about pushing the banks to reform the mortgages on the property. Everything is talked about in terms of we need taxpayer money. We need taxpayer money. Tim Wu wrote a great article in the New York Times this week about how reshaping mortgages is really what's needed for New York City right now, and that it is constitutional. So I advise everybody to look at that. Thank you very much. Oh, residential entryways. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Okay, let me. All right, so next we have Marna. So thank you for sharing that link, Pete. So we're gonna try to we're gonna promote. If you're gonna speak, we're gonna promote you to panelists. Sorry about that, Pete. We're trying to work that out. So Marna, I'm gonna promote you to a panelist to speak for 2 minutes. As a reminder, please keep this brief. Did she get upgraded? I tried to upgrade her. Let me see. Oh, there you go. 2 buttons. Marna? Marna, are you ready to speak? You'll need to unmute. Oops.
You just had it there, Marna. Just unmute. Marna, we need you to click your unmute button, which should be the microphone symbol.
Or *6, I think. Okay.
Do you want to call on the next person while we figure this out with Marna?
Right. I'll just keep her on there. Leslie Clark.
I guess we're having some tech problems.
Leslie, if you unmute yourself, we'll be able to.
Great, I'm unmuted.
Great.
Hold on, and I'll let you see me too if you care. You know, before I had something else entirely planned to say tonight until I discovered that this is already passed the committee in the city council and it's going to be voted on in 2 days, and it's basically a done deal. This process, according to the testimony before the city council, was done, which was by Commissioner Trottenberg, was done by truncating the community process. That's us. We were eliminated from this process. The person who sponsored this bill made it very clear that they wanted relaxed enforcement and no fines. We've already discovered what happens when there's no enforcement and no fines. We put up with that because we were told that this was going to be to the end of October. Now it's another year and maybe forever. And also in that testimony, and I really suggest people go and look at that testimony, they are talking about privatizing, that is conveying to private hands public property in perpetuity. And I am not exaggerating. That is the language that is used in testimony by the city council, in perpetuity. Where are we in this process, since we certainly have had nothing to say so far? Nothing to say. Are we here at this meeting tonight because we are going to be involved in the future? Or is this just theater? What are we doing here? This is now going to go on for another year. And by the way, this is being pushed by our own city councilman who's ignored every attempt that we have made to speak to this person. The fact is we are conveying into private hands public property in perpetuity to one industry only. What about other people? Just one industry. And although we are now very sympathetic with this industry, I would just like to remind people that their last major political fight was against the minimum wage, and their previous political fight was against granting sick days to their employees. I would like to know if someone on this committee can tell me what we are going to do to restore citizen involvement in a process that is permanent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hear your frustration. Let me move you back. We still need to hear from Marna, correct? That was Leslie, right?
That was Leslie, right?
Thank you, Leslie. Marna, are you ready to speak? Okay. All right. Next, we have Stuart Waldman.
We actually, the next person is Georgette. I had already promoted her.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Georgette Fleischer here. Are people able to hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Wonderful. I really want to commend Ms. Clark for her comments, and Pete's also. I am profoundly appalled at the mass privatization of public property for one industry. It just seems absolutely counterintuitive on every level. I'm disturbed by the fact that I haven't heard any mention, and I'm afraid that I came a little bit late because I had trouble getting in, as a number of attendees or would-be attendees did. So I wasn't able to hear Ms. De La Rosa's top comments. But from what I've heard so far, I've heard nothing about the COVID risk that residents are being subjected to every single day as a result of this program. I'm sitting here with my little daughter, who's 2.5 years old. We had a COVID scare last week, and I can tell you that the 48 hours between our taking our swabs and getting, thank goodness, a negative result were the tensest 48 hours of my life, some of the tensest 48 hours of my life. We cannot walk out of our building without being confronted by patrons and restaurateurs wearing no masks and not social distancing. Why should we be subjected to that? How can that be justified? What is the public policy behind undoing everything that the state of New York has done to try to curb this pandemic, to which I have lost family members and friends, in order to bend over backwards for the nightlife industry? The other thing that I've heard nothing about, I have occasionally started riding a city bike to pick up my daughter from school. I had an accident on Mott Street on a city bike. Luckily, the worst thing that happened is that my shins wound up getting banged up. But there are roadway cafes on one side of the street and roadway cafes on the other side of the street. And even though Mott Street is a designated bike lane, designated by the DOT, there is not enough room for a moderate-sized passenger vehicle and one city bike to get through without causing an accident. What is the public policy behind ignoring this public health and safety issue in order to bend over backwards for the nightlife industry? Thirdly, we have had no enforcement around Petrosino Square. We are within the 5th precinct. Areas to our east, on the Lower East Side, that are serviced by, I think it's the 7th precinct, areas to our northwest that are serviced, I believe, by the 6th precinct, have gotten enforcement so that the worst operators in those areas have been shut down. We have gotten no enforcement from the DOT, from the New York State Liquor Authority, from the police department. And so this situation has gone on for months, and the restaurateurs are so full of themselves that when I went over to Beau Cafe a few weeks ago, when they were blasting music at 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning, they were so convinced that the police would respond favorably to them that they went ahead to start to call the police on me for having the audacity to come in and make a complaint about their blasting music. I just have lost visual here, and I hope that you're still able to hear me and see me. I think that I'm going to conclude my comments there.
Thank you, Georgette. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, public health was a concern that was highlighted in the survey results. I probably didn't touch on it enough, but it is definitely public health and public safety were definitely called out in the survey results, and also as issues that we identified, both of those back in June, and were not, our elected officials I did not take that into consideration when making this policy, which is very disappointing. I will move you back to, unless you've been moved already. Marna, did we ever get to you? If not, I'm going to move to Stuart Waldman.
And Marna, it doesn't look like we can't hear you. We can see you, but we can't hear you. It doesn't look like your microphone is working.
I'm going to check the chat because I haven't looked. Okay.
So it looks like Libby Mann is the next speaker. So I will, oh no, Stuart. Stuart, we also can't hear you, Stuart.
Okay.
You need to unmute yourself one more time. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Stuart.
Hi. Okay. I had a whole thing written out, but after hearing the other testimony, I just want to say, you know, first of all, I'm not against it on a temporary basis at all. In fact, even though I live on Bedford Street, we've been before the community board for noise issues with the SLA many times. I knew what was going to happen, but I was sympathetic both to the restaurant industry and the city needing a boost of life, a jolt of life. But the idea of making it permanent boggles the mind. This community board has backed us with the SLA every time a restaurant tries to get a license in a neighborhood, we demand that their doors are closed and their windows are sealed because of noise. Now, there's a lot of whereases in your resolutions about the noise on narrow Bedford Street. Now, we're going to make permanent to take that noise out of the inside and onto the street. You know, like every night, it's a party in my house. And there's nothing the restaurant could do about it. I'm not blaming them, but it's an impossible situation, especially on a narrow street. Second thing is zoning that I haven't heard much talk about. Like most of the West Village, we're R6. And if you look at the zoning text, it says sidewalk cafes may be located in all R10H districts and in all commercial districts. So there's nothing about R6. I'm not a zoning geek, so I don't know what can be done about that. I feel that if the zoning text has to be amended, which I saw in the testimony they're talking about, I think you need a ULIP procedure, which would really be good to slow this process down. And just the idea, forget the letter of the law, the spirit of the law. If you allow a business to be open during the night out in the street, how is it a residential district? If that's a residential district, what's a commercial district? And finally, climate. And not many people talk about it, but I'm a climate activist. And the idea of 10,000 restaurants having heaters, electric heaters on throughout the fall and winter, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions is mind-boggling. City last year declared a climate emergency. This shows that it was just lip service. Paris, which has had outdoor heaters in their cafes for years, banned them and temporarily stopped the ban for this year, but it's going to go back next year. And that's exactly what the city should do. So my thing is both, as Leslie said, the input and the permanence. I can't see this being made permanent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stuart. I can tell which survey results were yours with the R6 being called out. And I think, I'm not going to respond to every comment. Obviously, I want to move this along, but I will say this is a huge a land use issue that is not being addressed at all, especially in our district, and what it means for that. So the permanence of the program and in general, I think a lot of people do feel that sentiment that they are not completely against it, but they feel there was no lack of public input. And can we slow this down just a little bit? So I think we moved Libby Mann or Elizabeth Mann over.
Okay, there I am. I'm unmuted. Hi, everybody. I'm going to try not to repeat because people have made so many brilliant points on a sort of a larger systemic level. I think it's appalling that this seems to me like a grab on the part of the Hospitality Association, taking advantage of a crisis that's hurting an awful lot of people to better themselves. And I don't necessarily trust that they're doing it because they really care about their workers. I think this is an absolutely outrageous, brazen move to usurp public property. It's terrible. The lack of public input is obviously quite wrong. The idea of making it permanent when it's barely been in place, it hasn't even been in place for 4 seasons. It's just been in place for the pleasant months. The lack of consideration for the heaps of trash that are now ending up on the corners and spilling into the streets because there's no place to put the trash. The lack of concern for, I was on a cane for a while this summer. There were streets that I had to turn sideways and kind of slither down because the chairs were so crowded. Imagine somebody in a wheelchair. The people coughing and yelling and laughing without their masks as I walk by, that's unnerving. I'm an older person. There are just so many things wrong with this, but I think the main concerns are the lack of public input, the lack of any regard for zoning, the lack of any regard for thinking just to rush into this makes absolutely no sense. You just can't make something like this permanent with so little experience and so little to base it on. The propane gas is worrisome. The heaters are worrisome. It was initially done because of a crisis. Why make it permanent when the crisis is over? That makes no sense to me. But I do think as residents, as people who've lived in the neighborhood and worked with restaurants, literally with our block association for a couple of decades to negotiate things like, keeping the windows sealed and the doors closed and all of those things. It's just like it's all been blown out of the water. All that decades of civic discourse that's been built up is no longer valid. So I protest this on so many levels that I'm stumbling over my words, but it's a really wrong move. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. We'll move you back over in just a second. Before we move on to more speakers, we do have 2 representatives from DOT that I'm going to promote to panelists. There's 2 of you, Jackie, so I'm adding both of yours, so please choose whichever one. So we have Jackie Lazaro and Kyle Gorman. And I know Kyle is from the Public Space Open Restaurants team. And then we also have Andrew Kunkis, who is the Manhattan Borough Deputy Director. I hope I got that right, from the Mayor's Office. So let me scroll and promote him to panelist. Andrew, if you're ready, I can give you the next slot to, if you had some comments you wanted to give us.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting this group. I really think this is a great time to discuss all these questions and start getting some answers to a lot of these. So a lot of the concerns that I've heard tonight are relating to the lack of public input on this project. There was a need to do this very quickly. So we will admit that we did truncate the community input process. And this is something that we are going to be continuing to take as the program continues to develop. And we're going to be using all the concerns that we hear from restaurant owners, from community members, community boards, from my agency colleagues, and we're going to be using this to continue to tailor how our outreach, how our enforcement and whatnot is done towards these restaurants. Because we really want to make this as successful as possible for all restaurants, restaurant visitors, and the surrounding neighborhoods. So as anything comes up, please continue to send it over to my office so we can raise it and we can see if these are issues that are happening citywide or if this is something that is just unique to Community Board 2. I did also hear a lot of concerns about the outdoor heating. I know this is something that is still being discussed on how to best go forth with this. To the best of my knowledge, we are not allowing propane heaters at this time because they do pose a health and safety risk. But that is something that the deputy mayor's offices are working diligently to figure out the best way to go forth with this, as well as how these outdoor restaurant establishments are going to operate in the winter with snow plowing and whatnot. But I just really want all of you to know that as new issues arise, please continue to send those over to me because we are going to use those for as long as we are working on this program to help make it better for everyone involved. So having these discussions, asking these questions, raising these concerns, having a poll like the one that you guys at CB2 did earlier, really wonderful information for us to take back and use when making our policy decisions. So thank you. And I'm gonna stay on, and as people have questions and whatnot, if they have anything directed towards me, I can do my best to answer that. And I do believe we do have some of my colleagues from DOT and possibly some of my colleagues from the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection on the line who may be able to answer some more questions that are directed towards them.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Andrew. I really appreciate you joining us and joining us on short notice and rounding up some great folks. I'm going to add Alberto Roldan from the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection in just 1 second. Andrew, really quickly while I've got you here, you know, there's people on this call, there's residents on this call that feel as though this is a done deal and that there is no room for citizen input. And so, you know, is this a done deal? You know, there's just a lot of people feel really defeated in that sense, as though this has already been decided and that they feel as though a little helpless. There's not much say that they have.
So this is something that has been decided. We are moving forward with this, but what is really important for each of us is to continue to have these conversations that we can take this information back to the people who are actually making these policies and use it to tailor it so it is the least intrusive and the most enjoyable to everyone involved. And we will continue to do that. There has been quite a few concerns about enforcement. I see some of the comments popping up in the chat box. You know, we are working with multiple agencies who are out there doing enforcement. And in the beginning, we could have done a better job educating both businesses and our inspectors on what exactly each inspector is there to look at, there to enforce. And we have since been working with our agency partners to narrow down what it is that each of these inspectors are going out there to look for and provide much clearer feedback to the restaurants so they can take that into consideration when they do make adjustments, rather than in the beginning where it was a little bit more vague and people were often getting cited by multiple different agencies for different things. One agency would say they're in compliance and another one does not. But we have taken a lot of feedback from community groups, a lot of the bids and restaurant associations, and have used that to help us tailor it. And this is a work in progress, and we will continue to bring this information back, and we will continue to fine tune this so it's the best available program for everyone involved.
Thank you, Andrew. And, you know, I know that there's people in the chat that are furious with this moving forward without public input, and it sounds like there are decisions that have been made, and that now the public input is about the malleableness of how this policy is shaped. It's not so much as to whether or not it's moving forward. It is moving forward. So with that, I would say to people on the call, that's kind of where we're at with this. This was not, you know, something that we had anticipated. We definitely fought back in June for a much larger role for the community. And so this is what has been handed to us, that we have a voice in fine-tuning what is already there. So I know that a lot of people are very furious about us being in this place. But with that, we're going to move forward with the rest of the testimony. I've added Alberto Roldan, as I said before, who's from the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. We've also got Kyle Gorman from DOT and Jackie Lazaro. I have two of you, I think, on here. So before we continue with the rest of the public testimony, I'd like to give each of them a few minutes to respond to what they've heard so far, and to tell us about enforcement, DOT, and what's the enforcement plan, and when can we get some of the guidance that I had outlined at the beginning that we're still missing. So if one of either Kyle or Jackie could answer that, or Alberto, for what falls in your jurisdiction, I ask that to all three of you.
I'll kick us off. So my name's Kyle. I'm one of the folks at DOT that's managing our open restaurants and open streets restaurants programs. So you've got the guy who's behind all of this here to talk to you today. I want to echo what Andrew said, is that we are moving towards a permanent program, but what a permanent program looks like is still to be determined. And I think that's where all of your valuable input and feedback that you've shared tonight and that we've heard over the last couple of months will be incorporated in that. That's really all I have to say, and we'll take it from there.
Alberto?
Yes, sure. I'll go ahead and just thank you for the input. Thank you for inviting us today. Lots of good comments, important feedback. For DCWP, just so you know, we've done 32 business education days where we've gone door to door to each of the businesses and let them know what the reopening guidelines are. We've gone with an inspector from our team and also from SBS to give the owners, you've done this outdoor dining incorrectly, what are some questions and all that. We give information out as well. If you feel that it would be helpful, and it sounds like it might be helpful to your neighborhood, your community board, to have us do another walkthrough, we can definitely do that. We did it with the Village Alliance earlier in the summer, and that was pretty successful. And also, if you want us to do like a presentation on what we cover, whether it's workers' rights or a joint presentation with SBS, we can try to coordinate that on our end. But just let me know. My information is inside the chat box, and definitely reach out. Don't hesitate. Definitely would be willing to sit down and talk to all of you.
Thank you so much. And I know that the chair, Carter Booth, had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask all three of you, something that I've heard a lot about from residents and businesses is there's no guidance on the heaters yet. And that was promised on the 1st, I think. And we're almost, 2 weeks later. This weekend's supposed to rain on Friday, and it's supposed to be pretty cold on Saturday. That guidance is really important, and it's not helping anybody not having that guidance at hand, and particularly how they're supposed to legally store the propane tanks. There's been some loose talk about them being stored outside, but nobody knows what that actually means. So anybody who has their heaters already, who has their tanks, are locking them up inside or keeping them inside, which is precisely, I think, what the concerns were. So when do you guys expect that to roll out?
I would defer to Andrew. I think we're waiting on City Hall's guidance on that, so we can roll that out.
Yeah, the mayor of operation is taking care of this, and you're absolutely right, Carter, that we did promise this some time ago, and we have not given clear guidance on this, and that's something that we do need to do, especially as the days are getting shorter and colder and wetter. So that is something that will our team, and as soon as possible when we can, to real answers of how we will go with this, and how businesses can safely heat their outdoor establishments. Because you're right, we do owe it to the establishments to give them this information, and we owe it to them to be able to be as successful as possible within the limitations that we've allowed.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
And lastly, I will quickly mention that if sidewalk cafes ever come back, when they come back, we do have on our website guidance for heating and electrical heating and all that that would apply to sidewalk cafes. So that is on our website, but this is separate from the current outdoor dining situation. So we're waiting on guidance from the outdoor dining. But in terms of sidewalk cafes, when that comes back into play, we do have that guidance already ready to go.
Thank you so much. We're going to move back to, and please know I am reading through the chat, and I do see a lot of the frustration. I do see people that are very frustrated but are thankful to these agency representatives for coming in and really responding directly to what we've been hearing for months. And so thank you for taking the time to come on here and for continuing to listen. So we're going to move forward with the public testimony, and a lot of people are asking for contact info for you guys. I know you put it in the chat, so thank you for those who have. I'm going to probably do a follow-up email that will list all of that for everyone who attended this evening, and we will post it on our site as well. So with that, I'm going to move forward with Kate Hillard. I'm going to promote you to a panelist.
And while we're waiting for Kate to be promoted, it would be nice, along with obviously some of the complaints that people hear, to hear about what's working and what's positive, just so that we make sure that that there's good indications about, you know, what is working with this program, because we want to hear that as well.
Thanks for that, Carter.
Well, hi, this is Kate. I just wanted to say thank you for holding this forum. Really appreciate it. I think our biggest concern, myself and my husband, I'm a small business owner. I live and work within the district. We have a home that's a ground floor residential unit, and it's a very cozy 400 square feet. And we can't get very far away from the windows, and all of our windows face the street, and there's 30 people eating dinner and having brunch literally within eyeshot of our apartment. And I think it's just pretty upsetting that we weren't really consulted in this to begin with. It really will actually affect the value of our apartment. And as a small business owner, I'm just trying to keep myself afloat the same way that the restaurants are. So to think about my home value also going down at the same time of not having clients and being able to pay myself a salary, it's quite upsetting. So I would ask that you take a look at what we can do for ground floor residential. I know that it is not a huge percentage of the neighborhood, but it does exist. And we were aware that when we bought something on this facing the street, there might be people passing by and the occasional person standing, talking on the cell phone, etc. But we did not plan for that many people sitting directly outside of our apartment with nowhere to go. We're gonna have to box ourselves in. So it's a major, major disruption to myself and our other neighbors who don't even have the luxury of being one flight up away from the noise and disruption.
Thank you so much for that, Kate, and for attending tonight. And I did the committee did receive your written testimony from you and Kyle. So please know that we have seen that. So thank you.
Great, I appreciate it. And I'm happy to provide pictures and whatever. I'm a graphic designer, so I can make charts and things.
I mean, probably better charts than I had in mind. So I might take you up on that. Thank you so much again. I'm going to move you back to an attendee. Thanks. So next we have Elizabeth Sabo. Elizabeth, I'm going to promote you to a panelist.
Hi, this is Elizabeth. I'm going to be very brief. I have a cold and I can't possibly add anything more articulate than some of our previous attendees. Leslie comes to mind, and everybody has been so well spoken. I had a presentation prepared focused on health, and there's no need to repeat all that. But frankly, I'm just stunned and appalled to be looking at panelists from our city infrastructure who are just simply telling us that it's a done deal. When we've been working really hard to try to slow the process down and give our feedback. It seems to me that the special interest hospitality industry just won the day here, and the rest of us could pretty much take a walk. It's very upsetting. I don't know how to proceed. I don't want to add any more negative comments, but I'm sure that so many of us share something similar. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Let me move you back. Oops. All right, so next we have Kyle Sklarov, if I'm saying that correctly. Kyle?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Valerie, for organizing this. And I guess I would just start. My wife, Kate, just spoke, so I won't take up too much of the committee and everyone's time repeating what she said. But I'm just, you know, when I hear other residents speak and when I see what the community board is doing, I mean, it just reminds me, like, why I love New York and why I'm gratified to live in this neighborhood and live in the village pretty much my entire life, and be with people who are smart and care and want, you know, we love this neighborhood for what it is. And all of the issues people have raised, in my opinion, are spot on. I mean, privatizing our public spaces for private industry. I mean, we live on Perry Street where there's barely room, you know, for a car to drive by, let alone outdoor seating and a car. And what if we wanted a bike lane on that street or something else? So privatizing these spaces just for the restaurant industry, which people have raised a lot of, I mean, it's amazing how many good points people have raised. So thank you everyone for doing that. And the fact that, you know, as Stuart said, he lived on Bedford Street, I think. Like, these streets were not meant to have outdoor dining, you know, day and night. Especially, we live on a ground floor unit facing the street. I mean, the quality of life issues, you know, I encourage other people, you know, from the mayor's office and from DOT to think about these things and to come check this out. I mean, it's not like, oh, you travel to the village for a night and you eat dinner there and it's amazing. Like, yes, I love that too. I go to eat at these restaurants, but to think that it's permanent for the residents who live there, I think needs to be questioned. And then, wow, was I shocked, Andrew and Kyle, when you've come on this call and just said, oh, yep, it's permanent. You know, I think you people, like, you know that the residents care about their community and why you would not want public input when there's a public input process on every other major decision that's part of our city. It's really a shame. I'm really just, it's sad to take this moment, this horrific moment in our city. And I understand there wasn't a public input process for the emergency measures. I supported those. I still support them. But to say there's not time for public input for something that's permanent, that's just not true. It's just absolutely not true. So, like, let's hear what people have to say and let's have a voice as a community. Thank you, Valerie, and thank you everyone else on the committee.
Thanks, Kyle. Right. And again, let's please keep the comments not personally directed at individuals, please. Next, we've got Mickey McGee. Mickey?
Thank you. I'm here. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Am I permitted to screen share a slide deck, or do I need to share that with you in the chat as I had previously done?
I've got it. I was going to pull it up. Hold on.
Thank you so much if you could share that screen.
Yeah. And I know that it's we're gonna have to go through it pretty quickly. I don't want to.
It's less than 3 minutes.
Okay.
It's very quick. It's a picture book of what's going on.
And this is a public document. If you want to share that for others to see as well, I guess. But I will pull it up in just 1 second.
I put it in the chat right now.
Perfect.
It only went to panelists. Hang on 1 second. Let me put it to everybody.
I will screen share in just 1 second. I just also want to reiterate for anyone in the attendee list, if you have anything else you would like to submit to hello@cb2manhattan.org, I will put that in the that email in the chat in just a second. So please know you can still submit testimony, written images, decks, etc. All right, so let me, okay, share screen.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate your doing that. And if you can just press in the upper right-hand corner and put it in present mode, that would be fantastic, because then everyone will see the slides in their larger form. Hope it's loading. Thanks.
I know.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time on this. And I just want to let you know that you're going really fast. We supported open restaurants in the South Village as an emergency pilot program, as so many people in this meeting tonight have shared. Can you go to the next slide, please? We were really concerned about our neighborhood restaurants. Next slide, please. Bombay Bread, which had our marvelous, marvelous chef, Floyd Cardiz, is closed. This is what it's been looking like. Floyd passed away due to COVID-19 in March. We were heartbroken about that. Next slide, please. Aqua Grill is closed. There are many other restaurants that are closed, but restaurants haven't shown any concern for residents. And this is an epic problem. Our streets and our sidewalks are impassable. Next slide, please. There's less than 8 feet of clearance for pedestrians in almost all locations. There's no ADA compliance almost anywhere. This is 142 Bar. This is Perla Soho. Stop on the Perla Soho side, because this particular restaurant has a large open air lot behind that blue advertisement fence there. They have plenty of outdoor space. They're in the street, they're on the sidewalk, and they're on the sidewalk on Brim Street as well. I'm not sure what that is about, other than taking over all of our public space. Next slide, please. McDougal Street is a disaster. It's a narrow single file winding pathway. It is not part of the open streets program. That is to say, traffic still continues on that street. In this slide, you can see that there's restaurant equipment that's been left sitting unused in the sidewalk space. Next slide, please. Wait staff have thanked me for noticing that they're in unfortunate positions of having to serve in a public pathway. This is consistent, next slide please, all across McDougal and in many other sites. There's no space. If you go back please, one slide, this is Prince Street on the south side of the street between Raoul and the adjacent restaurant. On the exact other side of the street, next slide please, we have Pinch. That means that there is no sidewalk you can pass through. You have to walk in the street. It has a bike lane as well. Open Restaurants is pushing us into the streets as pedestrians. This is McDougal. This is Spring. Notice also that there's a live band, amplified music. This is Spring as well. Hydrants are blocked. This is on Thompson.
We received this, the board office did receive this and did contact FDNY.
Yeah, I went by 2 nights ago, it was still blocked.
Okay.
So this is an earlier slide that I'd sent to the city council. Piles of garbage are everywhere on our sidewalks and streets, and a lot of it is obviously restaurant garbage. This is restaurant waste, this is restaurant waste. This is restaurant equipment left to hang out in the street. We don't know who did that. This is garbage piled up next to Bombay Bread. This is in one of the enclosed spaces for dining, garbage piled up. Amplified music blasts into the night. No slides on that. And I haven't even talked about parking. If you go back to that last slide, I haven't talked about parking.
And to the note about amplified music, that is a mix of buskers and potentially illegal music happening.
But it's been in restaurants. It's associated with the restaurants, just to be clear. And that's the ones, that's what I'm talking about. And I don't own a car. Most of my neighbors have taken the decision not to own cars, but occasionally you need a car to be able to move something or to be able to go out of town. You might rent a car. There's no place to go. So please, please, please stop talking about this. Go back, please. Stop talking about this as a success. It's not. It's a disaster for our communities. We look like we live in a shanty town. It's not safe. Can you go back, please? It's not safe, it's not clean, and it's not livable. Next slide. Keep it for the pandemic. Yes, save our restaurants. But don't make it permanent, as everyone has said tonight. I made these slides earlier today. Fix the regulations so we have a place to walk safely.
Sidewalks or streets, but not both at the same location. Real clearance, 8 feet or 6 feet, but no exclusions for other street fixtures. No blocked fire hydrants, no outdoor amplified sound.
And to be clear that the amplified sound is illegal, it's just not being enforced. And that's the
Yeah, I spoke with the precinct on Sunday night as well. They told me that they're not issuing licenses right now for amplified sound, and that there's also no enforcement right now because they're not issuing licenses. We need real enforcement, not self-certification. We supported this as an emergency program. Shared public space, yes, absolutely. Stolen public space, absolutely not. And we thank you. There's always a way to carry on.
Thank you, Mickey, for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Sharing. Mickey, we did receive, in addition to this other footage and multiple photos and emails. So please know that we are in receipt of that, and so is the committee.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm very concerned about this being made permanent, as most people have said on here. This is a public land grab. This is a land grab. There's a long history of land grabs. That's exactly what this is.
I would just like to add a comment about amplified sound really quickly. So amplified sound, if you have an SLA permit, you are allowed to have music that is incidental to your dining experience. That's a pretty broad definition for what's permitted. So that is what a lot of the outdoor dining places are following currently. But you are correct that the NYPD isn't typically issuing the amplified sound permits that are required for like events, things like that. And then of course there are buskers that have been popping up a lot.
Just to be clear, Kyle, though, that incidental music's on the interior only, correct? Because exterior music has never been allowed in the city within any public spaces, only in rear yards.
I think we'll need to circle back. It's been our talking point so far that you could have music that was incidental to the dining experience. But
Where has that ever been permitted prior? It was never allowed in sidewalk cafes. Okay, so it was never contemplated.
We'll have to circle back on that. I mean, I don't know, Andrew, if you have anything particular to add. So you and Mike.
Yeah, so to the best of my knowledge, with one of the mayor's recent executive orders, we stopped issuing amplified sound permits, and we are only allowing acoustic music, and this is to prevent people from gathering, especially people coming from outside of the neighborhood. We have heard that there are establishments that are playing their music inside and leaving the music quite loud so it can be heard on the street. As we hear about that, we are following up the restaurants, and it usually follows with a warning, followed by some type of more enforcement. But we are taking those calls. Either you can reach out to the precincts directly, but by sending them to 311, we do keep an aggregated list where we can see who the repeat offenders are and who we need to follow up with more stern enforcement.
So would we be incorrect in taking guidance from the Liquor Authority on exterior music?
I think that we should just circle back. We'll check back on
No,
our
it's
end.
my understanding that the Liquor Authority, yeah, we can definitely do that, but it's my understanding that the Liquor Authority does not allow outdoor music unless it is approved by the community board and in the stipulations.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Catherine Quinn. Catherine, are you on?
I found unmute. Hello.
Hello. Yes, your turn.
Okay, thank you very much. I just found Mr. Booth's most recent question very interesting, and it does, but I do want to talk about self-certification because there's been a lot of talk from the DOT people about things are being self-certified, and my assigned role is to discuss my concern about propane tank heaters. And we all know, I'm sure the DOT employees know, that propane is incredibly dangerous because it's heavier than air. And for instance, DOT would not allow propane tanks to be transferred over through any tunnels, the Lincoln, the Holland, et cetera. To come into New York City, canisters of propane can really only travel on the lower level of the George Washington Bridge because the stuff sinks down. When it leaks, it goes into, perhaps the basements of the restaurants next door to me on either side, but also into the subway, and they can explode. And part of this program has, is that it will be self-certified. I just want to state that the self-certification for natural gas hasn't worked that well. For instance, my neighbor 2 doors down is a building owned by Icon Realty, a neighbor who, a realty owner who had a gas explosion on 2nd Avenue, a famous gas explosion. One of our neighbors, Robin Felcher, can't be on this call tonight because her building had a natural gas leak. Natural gas, not as difficult to deal with or not as dangerous as propane. This idea that propane, whether it's on right next to my bedroom window, if the bar next door has propane heaters next to my building, or in the roadway or a half a block down, is a terrifying possibility. The entire concept of self-certification for all of these regulations, when you see the pictures of what desperate bad boy operators do when there isn't any enforcement, is chilling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Just to clarify that the electric heaters are allowed in both the sidewalk and the roadway, and that the propane heaters are for sidewalk use only. I'm gonna link the DOT page, Open Restaurants page, that has the updates that were part of the slideshow and also has the other regulations for sidewalk and roadway seating. So
I'm aware of that.
Perfect.
But still, they can park a propane heater next to my bedroom window and have it self-certified.
We hear you. Thank you very much.
And when that
sorry, I moved you too quickly. 1 second. I did not mean to cut you off. Catherine, apologies. I did not mean to cut you off. It went really fast. Did you want to finish your thought quickly?
You need to unmute yourself.
The problem is when the bar next door to me stores their propane gas tank in a way that isn't covered by their self-certification and it explodes, it will kill me. That's my concern.
The storage, yes. Noted. I'm going to move you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Laura Tenenbaum. There's just a little bit of a delay when we move people over, so I apologize. Thanks everyone for being patient.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. For some reason you can't see me. Hold on. That should work.
There we go.
Anyway, I did send you something. I mean, I don't even know where to start on this.
You've sent, yes, I have. We are a receipt of what you have sent into the.
I know. I feel, and this is just very personal, since I was heading the SLA committee of the community board when the Padovan law was passed in the early 90s, that all our community efforts are just thrown under the rug here, or thrown out with the bathwater. Community input is gone. I feel as if Trump has won. I'm very concerned about, first of all, let me just say that this is about real estate, and it's the real estate industry. If you noticed in what I read, or what I sent to you, is that a great amount of the retail rents for ground floors, that the retail, it comes from the food and beverage industry. So this is an expansion of a giving to the real estate industry of our public lands now. I don't want to repeat what everyone has said before, because I think that every person from the community has spoken thus far, has said the real thing like it is. But I want to talk on another element about the heaters, which hasn't been talked about before. It's about air pollution. There's a reason that France passed a law last year forbidding outdoor heating. It is because of particulate matter and use of the environment. We are a city that just passed laws that's requiring buildings to be greener. And we are passing laws about restaurant use of heaters that is the opposite of being green. Our community has a problem with particulate matter from motor vehicles. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but down here on Broome Street, traffic is worse than ever. We are no longer traffic free the way we were the first few months of COVID-19. We have traffic up the kazoo, especially on weekends. And I think it is the visitors to Soho who want to eat at our restaurants, because our restaurants are not local restaurants. The local restaurants are pretty good about keeping us safe, but we have greedy restaurants. Self-certification does not work. We all know it doesn't work. And they're even taking away signing off from engineers and architects on designs. We need to have more coordination between the SLA and the DOT. We just heard members of the DOT misrepresenting the noise rules from the SLA. All of us who have ever talked with the SLA know you cannot have outdoor music with outdoor serving under the rules of the SLA, unless you get a permit from the police. I am so beyond myself, I'm kind of babbling here. I think I should rely on kind of what I said, but I think there should be harsh penalties for non-compliance. And I also think that the city should seriously think of not putting all food and beverage industry businesses in the same bucket. Bars and taverns are not restaurants. They have a different clientele, they have different problems, and they impact the community very differently. And that's where I'm going to stop because I'm babbling. Thank you.
Laura, thank you so much. And thank you for that history. And I'm going to move you back over to an attendee. Thank you again. And thank you for your written testimony. Again, I know there's a lot of frustration, and I understand that there are, between the city and the state guidelines, there is a lot that is that needs to get worked out. So again, I know everything is not perfect, and I know that the agencies are trying to figure that all out. And so I thank you guys for being on here to listen to all of this. I'm going to move next to Nancy Hasley had called in and emailed and was unsure. Nancy, if you're able to unmute, I'm not able to unmute you. I
think the unmute is *6 on the, if you're on your phone. Or you need to click the microphone symbol if you're calling in on your phone. I mean, if you're calling in using the Zoom app.
All right, I'm gonna move on. Nancy, we'll try you in just a second. I'm not able to unmute you. Next we have Robin Goldberg. Robin?
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I'm sure many of you know me. I was on the community board for over 10 years, part of the Liquor Authority Committee, and dedicated a lot of my time. I think that, you know, we're in uncharted territory, whatever industry, whatever place we are in life, whatever location. And I think that we need to sit back a little bit and relax about this whole outdoor restaurant venue. I think that it has finally breathed a little bit of life, energy, and happiness to so many more people than the haters that just want to hate. So I think it's fantastic. I feel that it not only taps into what the city is all about, which is art, culture, entertainment, food, and all of that. And without that, this would not be New York City. So it's great that one of the industries is coming back. Unfortunately, things like Broadway and dance and all of that is not coming back so soon. So we need something. And this is a great start. I think what is disappointing, though, is that our elected officials, particularly the mayor's office, had so much time to plan this out a little bit more clearly and make sure to communicate with our tireless volunteers at the community board level who know all of the laws, the regulations, and everything else needed to get this up and running in a great way. And it's disappointing to sit here after over 10 years of being involved in my community that a few people who represent our elected officials are completely in the dark and saying they're going to circle back. I don't think that we as citizens deserve that. We deserve much more than that. What's also disappointing with this great effort, again, I completely and totally support it and can't thank all of these restaurants, particularly the good restaurants, because it only takes a few bad apples to ruin it for everyone. And I think that that really is what's going on here. But the city itself, our mayor's office, is completely and totally unprepared. He's unprepared, cut out sanitation when we needed it the most. Even without restaurants on the street, the only thing that people really have is to go out and take a walk. They couldn't go to a gym. A lot of people will never go back to a gym. That's understandable. The sanitation is out of control. It's awful. And in this pandemic, to cut down on sanitation is just horrific. As far as real estate, I think that the value of real estate will only continue to either survive or increase in value if there is vitality in this city. And there is vitality when you go out on the street and you see people that are actually smiling and laughing and talking to one another and doing all of, I would say, at least 90% of the careful things that need to be done. We're not all reckless, and we're not the ones who really want to get sick. I think we're educated and we really kind of know what to do. And so again, I applaud the community board for having this forum, and I'm disappointed in our elected officials, which even includes our council members who I never see walking the streets, who really should be walking the streets and addressing these issues like sanitation, and sanitation including the homeless, vagrants who are taking advantage, and all of that. But thank you again.
Thank you, Robin. All right, I'm gonna try Nancy one more time. Nancy, if you can unmute, I just got your email. Nancy? Okay, if you come on, Nancy, just go ahead and if you can chime in after the next one. Next, we have Jeffrey Rowland.
Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Okay. How am I, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, the New York City's financial panic notwithstanding, you know, I understand the need for, you know, economic and employment assistance and how we have to help the restaurants. I get all of that. I'm not, you know, I know that the services need to get paid for and the revenue loss should be terrific or tremendous. But however, when the city assigned the DOT to manage a self-certification program, and it does not allow the NYPD to enforce those regulations, which is really, that's where the necessary manpower would be, it invites a flagrant abuse of the siting criteria and the social distancing requirements so clearly provided on the DOT's websites. I'm sure that many of the restaurants have obeyed the rules, but many have not. I and my neighbors have been trying for months to get the city to enforce the requirements at Piccolo Cucina at 75 Thompson Street. They violate the siting criteria by having seating on the curb side of the sidewalk, by not maintaining 8 foot of clearance, and by blocking the fire hydrant, which, by the way, is their entire frontage. All 15 feet on either side of the hydrant would completely block the frontage of this restaurant. And now, you know, notwithstanding the yet to be approved propane heating, Piccolo has already placed yesterday kerosene heaters, of which nobody has mentioned anything, just propane. Kerosene heaters, far more dangerous, liquid fuel heaters on the street platforms, not on the sidewalk, but on the wooden platform that they have their diners among. 2 or 3 of them were there yesterday. And you know, they're gone tonight, or they were earlier this afternoon, but maybe they'll return. Maybe it's holidays, they put them out. Maybe the cold weather's what they're waiting for. This business has other locations, and the one around the corner was closed because they had a fire. This is not a good omen. You know, I and my neighbors have been trying, we filed 311 complaints about social distancing and the sidewalk and a hydrant blockage, and they yield no results. I mean, it's hollow enforcement. To me, this means the city places a higher value on this business survival than the lives of the residents of Thompson Street. And not every business is going to survive this problem, but the ones that defy regulations and have no concern for the community should not survive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move you back to the attendee list. 1 second. Or maybe somebody did that already. Okay. Next we have Augustine Hope.
I said my piece, Tony.
No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Thank you guys very much for doing a survey. We think that is commendable and the questions were really good. But doing it when the decision has already been made is aggravating. And the city bragging about this being a done deal is actually incendiary for us. So case in point, when somebody makes an ill-informed comment about incidental music, it's a prime example of how we don't believe we are really being listened to. The point that I want to make here is traditionally public policy has a very strict methodology to it when it's being made. It includes discussion, it includes developing a plan, it includes getting public input, and then going to a vote. This whole thing is being done back-asswards. And it's not about this process needing to be slowed down, it's about it needing to be iced right now. Because it's quite possible that this whole program should not be done at all other than as an emergency measure. Let me give you one example. Our small businesses have been eviscerated in this neighborhood, and it's been a long time coming too, and a lot of it has to do with their rents escalating. And one of the reasons that rents have been escalating is because the hospitality interests and liquor sales can afford to pay much higher rents. So all the small businesses have been driven out of our neighborhood. What this new program that the mayor is proposing and is about to be voted on is going to do is going to hyper-inflate the rents in our neighborhood. I don't see how that helps small businesses at all. Now, if you're going to create public policy, you need to create, presumably, a detailed plan before you do it. You need something to work off, something to talk about. Doing it after the fact is insane. I'll give you one example. Outside our house here, we have a bike lane, clearly marked in green, used by a lot of bicyclists, used by a lot of delivery guys. It's taken a lot of getting used to when you step out into the road, but right now, there are several restaurants that are serving across the bike lane. The proposal as it stands seems to be that this is going to be made a permanent situation. Now, if you were really going to do a proper plan, maybe you should be thinking about, instead of putting the dining in the roadway on the other side of a bike lane, maybe you should be widening the sidewalk or moving the roadway, moving the bike lane around it. You know, things need to be done. There's some design that needs to be done. Let's not do it backwards. Let's do it the right way around. So I think you guys really need to step up. I think you need to stand up for us. I think you need to tell the city council, this is the wrong way of going about it. Everybody's heads is going to explode. Finally, as an example of what's been going on over the last summer, just lest anybody forget. And we sent in a chart of the noise complaints that have been coming in to 311. And it demonstrates that on average, there have been in the July, August, September quarter, on average over 2017, 2018, 2019, about 120,000 noise complaints in that 3-month period. In 2020, this year, it jumped to 255,000. It more than doubled. That is the scale of the problem we're dealing with. So let's sit down, figure out how this might work, and then decide how it should work, and then do a vote on it. Please stand up, stop them from doing this. You must, it's not a done deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Augustine. And to confirm, the committee did receive the chart and information. Thank you for sending that along. And will you confirm, was that data for CB2 only, or is that all of Manhattan? It just wasn't clear.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have made that clear. That was in New York.
For all 5 boroughs?
Yeah, okay. 255,000 complaints for CB2 would be surprising.
I assume so. So I just wanted to clear that up. But you did raise a really great point, and we are going to pull that 311 data for CB2 broken out by complaint. So thank you for that.
Well, on top of that, there's the non-compliance complaints, which are already over 33,000. And people don't even know to complain on that front. So anyway, thank you.
All right, next, we had called on Marna Lawrence before, and she had some audio issues, so we're gonna try Marna one more time. Marna, are you ready?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh my God. Well, I'm overwhelmed now though. I don't know, it's something in my settings. The whole thing is so outrageous, it's beyond, I have hardly any words. I sent out my memo to you with a lot of specifics that, relatively speaking, clearly the mayor doesn't care about the people that live here. And the people that are working for him and with him on this clearly don't care about the people that live here. So when he complains and berates residents for leaving the city in droves, when he has done nothing to protect us from these dangerous conditions and incoherent policies pertaining to these programs, I mean, it leaves one speechless. We are just, I can only speak, mostly speak for my community, Little Italy, Petrosino Park area, and to some extent Soho. We're just trying to sustain some semblance of a safe and healthy environment so that we don't have to leave. To suggest that they're just bumps in the road and it's been a success is absurd. It's a crisis of leadership and enforcement that was said earlier, yes. As with so many other aspects of New York City life, the scabs beneath the surface, as I wrote in my memo, reveal a broken system that enabled our community to be overloaded with liquor licensed restaurant after restaurant, many of them corporate driven at the expense of other commerce, and yes, it does come down to real estate. So now here we are, with one restaurant after another, self-certifying when we worked our asses off for years, the community board certainly has, to try to sustain some quality of life. We thought we had some respect, the people that live in this community, and clearly we don't. So, criteria regarding physical distancing. In my neighborhood, and I can name it, I don't want to take the time to name all the restaurants, all the streets, it's just a fact. Even those good actors, like one restaurant that was on Lafayette Street, just south of Prince, when they were able to add more and more and more, I wanted to go to dinner there. I can't now because I'm afraid to. And you can't walk the street at all. That's one example. They're all, mostly all less than a foot apart. When we're talking about chairs versus tables, right? I'm not very clear. What has to be 6 feet apart, the chairs or the tables? Stipulations that all restaurant and cafe operators, whether or not they operate with a liquor license, are required to place not just the tables, but the chairs at a 6 foot distance from each other. Let's look at the reality. The reality is in our neighborhood, our sidewalks and our roads are too narrow in order for us, the people that live here, and for people who come to go to these restaurants, to be safe. I've sent out numerous photographs, and there was a wonderful presentation earlier that indicate that, show it, prove it. That all restaurant, I'm sorry?
We are in receipt of those, Marna.
Yes, I know. That all restaurant, and thank you, restaurant, cafe operators and retail stores with outdoor spaces, and believe me, I have a problem here in this specific location to some extent, but I've been walking, I have a dog, I walk the streets, and I see the entire area of Little Italy, and I see what's going on, and it is not, there are worse actors even. Okay, so restaurant or cafe retail stores with outdoor spaces are required to place all objects on the sidewalk in front of their premises. Do I feel that there's going to be any genuine response to anything that our community reaches out to city council or the mayor or anybody? DOT, they're out of the picture.
Marna, I'm going to ask if you can.
I'm sorry. Okay. Open Streets program. No one's talking about that.
Wrap it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a specific problem here, a very, very bad problem. We have, for some reason, DOT has self-certified, said, okay, if you're a restaurant, if you have a few restaurants on the street, on that block, you can just cut off that street. They call it open streets. That's a little absurd. It's actually quite funny. They cut off the street. So we have at the corner of Mott and Spring Street is the street that's being cut off between Mott and Elizabeth. The traffic jam that it causes on Spring and especially on Mott is unbelievable. I have a video of it. I just couldn't get it to you. I can try to again. I couldn't get it downloaded well enough. But it's like, you should try going there and seeing it. It's not every single moment of the day, but at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, it's unbelievable. And the people that live there, air quality, noise, et cetera, et cetera. And the people in their cars, I've been stuck in that. It's unbelievable. You sit there for 20 minutes. You don't know why. Well, I do know why. Okay, so what's happening is there, you know, from Houston, Mott Street is pretty important. Houston to Canal to Broome Street to Kenmare, Broome Street, and the Bow and the Canal. That goes to the Holland Tunnel. That goes, you know, it's a very important thoroughfare. It's always busy. Now it's like impassable at times. Then you have Spring. And why is this? And then there's Elizabeth Street has been
Marna, I
covered
want to point out that we have received a lot of your written testimony.
Okay. So, and I appreciate.
Yeah, we're just talking about the program overall. We can't go street by street, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay. Well, why is it therefore that DOT enables, and the city in general enables, 2 restaurants on a city block, which is a public street, to be closed off to traffic because there's 2 restaurants and they asked for it? That's a big question that I have. It makes no sense. It's not fair, it's dangerous, and it's unhealthy for the people that actually live in some of these areas. Okay, so, and where was the DOT? And where were the and where's the NYPD when it came to the fact that there's numerous times that there's enormous amount of traffic at these locations, and they've done nothing.
We have pointed out there's a lack of enforcement.
Okay,
Mark.
and that was my next thing, a lack of enforcement.
Yeah,
Know about that. I don't even. What can you say about it? It's. I don't know. How do you make that? How do you make that happen when they don't care? That's what we get. They don't care about the people that live here, and you know why?
If we could wrap it up, Marna, I want to stay away from the personal attacks, so we can move forward.
It's not a personal attack only, but yes, I'm not attacking community board, certainly.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony and for your written testimony. Great. Next, we're going to go to Joshua Spodek.
All right, you can see and hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
All right, so I'll start with 2 things that I think are working, 2 things that are not working, and then 2 questions. So what I think is really working is that it's street activity. I mean, shops are closed, there's less street activity, and so I'm very glad to see people moving around, eyes on the street. I think that's very important. There's some places where the next thing I like is that there's some places where there are big wide streets. And I don't mind if they're taking up parking spaces that were privately, I mean, the public space that were used for cars. So that is something I don't mind. All right, some things that I don't like. The big one for me is the garbage on the streets, both the garbage that in bags that the restaurants put out, as well as the garbage from the single-use stuff. I think it's tempting to say we should get more sanitation to pick this stuff up, but I think that we should do what most of the world does, which is have less supply. I mean, we were getting close to a plastic bag ban, but the coffee cups, the pizza boxes, the pizza plates, the bottles, every can near me is overflowing by noon and then into the gutter. And this is all stuff that we didn't need to have before. So I'd love to see a ban on single-use plastic. The coffee cups, also the garbage has enough food in it that I think around here, I see most of the garbage bags are ripped open, presumably because there's enough food in there for homeless people to find food in it. Likewise, the cans are turned over often, and I see a lot of homeless people throwing garbage out. So I think France just made it illegal to throw away food. So we're throwing away enough that our garbage has a lot of food in it. So I think it's tempting to have more sanitation trucks. I think we should have less supply of plastic, less supply of disposable stuff, pizza boxes, coffee cups, things like that. Next, public urination and defecation. I don't know what the policy is, but I've been here 21 years in the village and since the 80s in Manhattan, and I've never seen so much public urination. And I don't know what the policy is. Are they allowed to go into the bathrooms in the restaurants? Because there's a lot of them out there. All right, questions. So the eyes on the street, I think, works. There's a couple places where there's no eyes on the street. The northwest corner of Washington Square Park, as long as I've lived here, has always walked through after dusk. They're always asking, smoke, want some weed? So now there's syringes. I don't know, they're smoking.
We can give this to the open restaurants program. I understand that is an ongoing issue.
So the question is it possible to do something there, to like Shake Shack in Madison Square Park or something that would make activity there? I'm not sure if that would help or not. And the last thing is that when I look at the number of restaurants in the city over time, it seems to be going up and up and up and up. And now it's going down briefly, but is it crazy to think that we could do something to promote farmers markets and local things as part of this program as an alternative? Restaurants are not the only way to eat. I guess I'm driven by a lot of the garbage, but farmers markets solve a lot of problems. They keep everyone knows I hope everyone knows the value of them. So wrapping up, I like the street activity. I don't mind people taking parking spots on big streets and avenues. Garbage, there's just a lot of it, more rats and vermin. I don't know what we're doing about bathrooms. And if we could do something to open up northwest corner of the Washington Square Park and the other places where the drugs are. Thank you. Oh, and thank you for everyone. It really helps to hear everyone, to not feel alone in this. So I appreciate everyone's taking the time to speak and so forth. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. All right, next, I do have Zella next, but we're still on resident. So I've got Leaf. So Zella, I'll call on you in just a second. So next we have Leaf Arntzen.
Can you hear me okay? This is Leif.
Yes, we can hear you, and apologize for not pronouncing your name correctly.
Okay. Thank you for everything. There's a lot going on here. And I've heard so much that is important to hear. As you know, we submitted a lot of information over the past few months, Valerie, pretty much across the board through the elected offices, through the block associations, through 311, all the portals. And we feel like we've been an engaged partner in helping survive this pandemic at both the viewpoint of the residents, which we are, and also the viewpoint of the restaurants, some of which we really treasure. And we've submitted a lot of ideas, I think, and a lot of, we've participated in conversations.
If you could specifically tell us the area you're speaking about, I know because I've read your testimony and I've been in receipt of it, but if you could just let everyone know what specific area you're talking about so that we can make sure that's captured. Thanks.
So we live on Cornelia Street, which, as most people here know, or probably know, is one block long street between Bleecker Street and West 4th Street. It has 9 restaurants operating directly on this block. It is a single block. There's a lot of pressure from that. Before COVID, it's always been a little bit of a balancing act, if you will, for Cornelia Street because of so many restaurants operating on that single block. We've done it well over many, many years and have resolved problems as they come up without a lot of trouble. Now with COVID, it has been a real pressure cooker in this part of the village. Bleecker Street and West 4th Street do not close during the Open Streets program, but they are operating on the streets. However, Cornelia Street actually does close. And what we're finding is that the spillover effect of just such a concentrated number of restaurants on Bleecker and West 4th, plus Cornelia Street, once the street closes, particularly on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, it really deteriorates very quickly, where conditions can spiral out of control in a matter of minutes, literally, as buskers and bands show up to play, not aware of what that could cause. The restaurants are trying to get going, and conditions can really get really close and dangerous. The sidewalks get congested terribly, and it's really a problem. We've outlined a lot of those things in detail. We've sent it to the CB2. We've sent it to the elected offices. We've had a lot of conversations about that, and there's been so much spoken about already on here, so I don't really need to go. It's the same issues that we're seeing. I think that if anything from this process, what's very disturbing, I think for me and my perspective is just realizing that, when I first heard this word permanent come up, there's been no real doubt in anybody's mind that I know of in my neighborhood about wanting to help the restaurants. But this idea of it being permanent, okay, permanent what? Permanent for the length of the pandemic, however long that may be, or is it permanent? And to take over or displace public space with privatization like that is a real problem. And so now my concern has gone just that much farther. Like, what happened to the CB2? What happened to the elected offices? What happened to everything that we are engaging in here to try to make informed decisions at the highest level here through the system, and a system that I believe in. So I'm really concerned about that. I just feel that there's been a unilateral decision made very quickly. Okay, it's an emergency, but to make a unilateral decision that has permanence to it, we all know what happens when something is labeled permanent. Is it permanent? Because permanent things can be very difficult to turn around. That is a ship that starts to sail, and once everybody kind of gets on that train, it's very hard to turn around. It takes a lot of energy, and so I'm very concerned about that. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm in receipt of your letter, and a lot of the items you outlined are the COVID risk, the sidewalk congestion, the trash, petty crime, sanitation, unhoused neighbors, or people around, emergency vehicle access. So I've got all of that, and we hear your concern and hear your concern about the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Kate Bostick. Kate.
Hi, yeah, from the Jane Street Block Association. So I echo that residents have. We supported and lobbied for it to be closed between 8 back when. The program as is to be permanent is untenable for resident block. A wedding tent set up in front of one of our buildings, and to live on a street, to wind up with a wedding tent with diners inside, know that it's not permanent, but to the permanent is for those residents in that building. They have lost ability to their residents for any handicapped access or deliveries, for any vehicles to pull up in front of them. So there's, there's the of the structure itself in residential buildings that, structure in there before. That's an issue. Derivative effects that everybody's taught, from noise to not enough room on the sidewalks to the sanitation issue. But there's a sort of ethos in the city now that I think with time, hopefully, it will feel different in the city. The quiet to the city now. And folks dining in a lot of our apartments are New York. When the tourist industry picks up again, and hopefully it does sooner than later, these restaurants will not have just workers in them who are thankful to be out of their apartments. We will have tents, if you will, filled with who don't live in the neighborhood, and that has impact as well. Wanted to throw that out there as a sort of quiet nature of the city now to some degree. All the noise issues that we're experiencing with the outdoor dining will only as people come back to New York City. And so I just want to actively support the close of Jane Street, and it's just in its current form, it is untenable as a solution. So we are very happy to work with DOT and with the community board to tweak the program to make it easier to live where they live and to make life normal for them, but untenable in its current form to be permanent.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Next, we have Gilda Pervin. Gilda?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm extremely worried about the heaters in particular because they're in use now, and now is this minute. And if they're not turned off as close to this minute as possible, who knows when a tragic explosion may take place? Tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening? We're sitting on a powder keg while issues are being debated. How do we deal with that? We don't want another Second Avenue explosion. So what do we do? That's my question.
Thank you, Gilda.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Nancy Pasley, I've unmuted you. All right.
Wonderful.
There we
Finally.
go. Glad you renamed as the wrong person, so thank you for your patience.
Thank you for yours, and hallelujah. I don't think I need to reiterate at any length what a lot of people have already said. My concerns are, of course, the total lack of enforcement, specifically on sidewalk congestion, street congestion, and noise, which is pervasive. And I too share this, as of today, learning that these heaters are being deployed but are not legal. I see them right now this evening walking around. They don't seem to me to have an electric.
Not to interrupt you, I know what area you're speaking of, but if you could just quickly just give an idea of the area you're speaking about, please.
Well, this was on Bleecker Street, between Upper Bleecker Street, like around 10th. But, you know, if they're not supposed to be out, I certainly hope there is enforcement, not the way that it is with, I don't know if I should call the fire department. But I really wanted to speak about a more basic issue here. And that is also something other people have been talking about. This was put in as a temporary measure for establishments in real distress. And it was badly needed, and it has been helping them. But it is a privilege, and some of them, too many, have been abusing that privilege. Now, with possibly an emergency coming to an end, I think we have to step back and say the streets and the sidewalks are public property. They are not surplus property that can be auctioned off like a vacant lot. They certainly can't be given away free on a permanent basis. That's simply illegal. And when the emergency finally ends, there's no justification for it whatsoever. If some of this street dining and sidewalk dining is to continue, one would hope it would be at a lesser density, but it's a matter of, I'm going to say, constitutional law. We would need to go back to a system where there are licenses with conditions, with a period of years, revocable if the conditions of the license are violated. This is what we have had up until now. And with real governmental oversight of the plans, not self-certification, which is, I don't want to use bad words. It's not a good idea, I'll put it that way. And we have previously had very thorough community input, certainly in this community board district, of every single location, which has got to be helpful to the process of balancing the needs of the proprietors and the needs of the residents. To say this is going to be, okay, it's working fine, it's going to be permanent, this is not acceptable. If it comes to that, maybe we have to get together and file an Article 78 procedure. I mean, I don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. But permanent giveaway for free to private enterprise, no matter how deserving, is illegal.
Thank you for your comments, Nancy.
Thank you. And thank you for finally figuring out how to get me in. I appreciate that.
No worries. All right, next we have John Nevium. I'm totally just going to promote you. John? John, are you on? Okay, let me see. Okay, I don't know if he went away. All right, if there are no more resident comments, I don't know what happened to John or if he disappeared, if anyone, I don't see him in either list. So if we're done with the resident testimony, I'm going to ask any bids or community groups. And I do have one operator that I will also call on after Zella. Zella? Zella, are you on?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
I can hear
Oh,
you.
okay. There are many people on this call who have served on the community board, and I do not mean to set myself above anybody else, but I did serve as chair of the Sidewalks Committee for 4 years on community board too, and as a result, was intimately familiar with the rules and regulations and the interagency collaboration that occurred with the DCA. That said, my opinion of the DCA is that they could certainly improve their enforcement, but we've reached a point where the allowance of public property being taken over by this current statute really needs to be put back to the DCA. For instance, the DCA requires that anyone who is going to have an outside heating has to take a course. It also complies with zoning regulations. It also has an enforcement task force, though possibly inadequate, that has very strict rules on all of this. The issue of there not being sufficient pedestrian right-of-way is really seminal to all of this. That in my observation, fire hydrants, trees, gates, resident entrances are not included in the pedestrian right-of-way is unconscionable. The Department of Transportation has never had any direct line of communication with the State Liquor Authority, with the Department of City Planning regarding zoning. I appreciate that they understand what streets might be able to be blocked off without disenfranchising the flow of traffic, but they're totally unprepared for managing street side dining in any way, shape, or form. So I am asking that the community board recommend that this process be moved over to DCA, number one. Number two, I'm advocating for anybody to vote for any mayor or any city council speaker in 2021 who will recognize this.
Thank you. Sarah. All right. John, are you? I saw you. No, I think you're gone. Okay. I don't have any more hands raised are there any more bids that want to speak? If not, are there any operators that would like to speak? I know I did see Evan Sweet from the meatpacking bid. You did have your hand raised, but I don't know if you got moved or I don't see you anymore. So if there are no operators that want to speak, John, are you ready to speak? It says you're connecting to audio, so I'm gonna wait a second. Okay, it's still connecting. All right, to move this right along, if there are no more resident testimony, it just says connecting to audio still for John.
Use two screens. And one, can you hear us?
Okay. I know we also have elected official reps on the attendee list as well. If you'd like to say anything, please feel free to raise your hand. We're going to go to the members of the Reopening Working Group Committee, and then I'll move on to CB2 board members. But I would like, if Andrew or Kyle, or I don't know who else is, or Jackie, I think Alberto may have jumped off, but if you have any response, any response to anything else you heard? If not, I'm going to go to the committee for questions, the Reopening Working Group Committee. But Andrew or Kyle, if you have any, if you want to respond to anything you've heard, please.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I did say this is something that the mayor has put forth, and we are moving forward with this, but there is still time for you to reach out to your city council members and urge them to vote in opposition of this. And I encourage you each to do so if that is what you feel is best for the community. We went forth with this to provide relief to restaurants and businesses throughout the city that were struggling much greater than many other areas. And this is an industry that largely makes New York so unique and is such a draw that we did need to act quickly, and we will continue to refine this process as we move forward. But we have not just reclaimed this space for restaurants. We have also opened up, I don't know exactly how many miles, but outside of a few hundred public schools, we have opened up that space to allow for outdoor learning and outdoor playing. And although I do see where this looks as a giving back to businesses and whatnot, but we're really trying to give everybody as much of an opportunity to succeed in this pandemic. And we will continue to do so as the pandemic continues, and we will continue to take the consideration of the community and use that when making our policies. And I want you each to know that I am going to be taking the concerns that each of you have raised and bringing back to my commissioner, to the mayor, and to the deputy mayors who are working on these policy decisions, and know that the conversation does not end here. That although I may not have all the answers for you right now or the answers that you want to hear, but I am an advocate for each and every one of you and the restaurants, and know that I will be bringing the same passion and energy back to my team and convey that so we can move forward in the best interest of everyone.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Andrew, I just want to comment. You had a couple of choice of words there. I don't think anybody disagrees with you on this call that this is a great program for right now. And I think just about everybody had indicated that. Maybe there are a couple of people who didn't. The whole issue is around the word permanent. And everybody that I've talked to, that's what comes up, is permanent. And that's what I think the major concern is that this program is made permanent without really seeing this through a full season and understanding the dynamics. This comes from operators that I've talked to. They don't know what the rules are. They have no idea what's going on. This comes from residents. They have no idea what's going on. Nobody's doing enforcement. DOT hasn't issued a single fine yet for this program, from our understanding, from the city council testimony. So I think that's really the issue, is the word permanent. And nobody's concerned, I think, with the extension of this program through next year. It's just that it becomes better refined, but there's a lack of confidence in the permanent. And that's really the real issue. And that's, for our community, that's what we're constantly hearing. And we don't know how to provide any confidence. And, because we haven't seen any of that action in this. And also, and fair enough, as the rules are figured out, I think that some of the things that the mayor had announced are great, great steps forward in making this a program run better, but nobody knows what the full rules are. nothing is out yet. Nobody, there's not a consolidated place where somebody who's not familiar with the rules can go and can see all of them very clearly and succinctly. And, just operators are confused, residents are confused. You even heard tonight, people are confused. And so that's really where this comes down to. And I think that that's what people would like, a little bit more confidence in understanding how the program is going to work so that we can support it in its entirety.
Yeah, so I hope to continue these conversations with this group and with you and Bob and Valerie to help set something like that up that we can put out to the community, to business owners, to operators, residents, on exactly who to call when they have an issue, who is going to be enforcing what, and how we can best get that to all the operators. So, tomorrow you guys are probably going to receive an email from me, asking for some times of when we can set that up. And I really look forward to talking that through with you guys, because if I'm hearing it from you, we're also hearing it from Community Board 2 in the Bronx, and Community Board 2 in Queens, and Community Board 2 in Brooklyn and Staten Island. So we really need to get these concerns addressed, and you guys have the pulse of the community. So it'll be invaluable information to help us move forward with how that looks.
Yeah, and for us, it's incredibly important because restaurants and eating and drinking establishments, we are one of the biggest epicenters of that in the city, and really having clear guidelines helps people make decisions, whatever those decisions may be. And we're very reliant on tourists and office workers because we exist in between those districts, and we have somewhat lower population because of our density is a little lower. And that's where the concern comes from, is having clarity on this, because most of our restaurants rely on that. But in absence of those, they need to know where they should be spending their money, very clearly what the rules are, whether or not it's worth it for them to stay in business or not. And sort of stringing people along is not fair. And that's where I think, this comes from. And obviously you don't want people to close prematurely, but without an understanding of what's supposed to happen, I think it's hard for the people who are not in straightforward conditions, which is most of our restaurants. Most of them are in the anomalies in the system. They're on a corner which has a turning lane. They've got a fire hydrant in front. There's no exceptions. One of the biggest things that we pointed out in June when we sent our first letter was the equity of the situation, providing opportunities for businesses that can't have a space right in front of them. And that's where we had offered our help to the city in really participating in finding solutions, not what it's turned out to be is a lot of neighbors saying no because there's not any enforcement or clear guidelines on what people are supposed to be doing. So, you're hearing frustration. I'll leave it at that.
No, and I welcome that, because the more feedback that you guys give to us, the better we can tailor these programs to meet the needs of the community. So, I welcome this passion from the community.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm going to move on to questions from the Reopening Working Group Committee for CB2. So I'm going to start out with Bob. Bob Ely.
Yeah. Thank you, Valerie. And thank you, guys, for coming down and hearing from the people that live in our neighborhoods. I really do echo what Carter just said about the word permanent. It was a very poor choice of words. We are, the word bridge makes sense, but permanent is kind of like, for our community, the residents in our community, the ones that are extremely exposed to eating and drinking already, even before the open streets occurred, are very upset. And you could see that in the chat tonight. You could see that in the words that they spoke. It's because the delivery from the mayor's office and the choice of the word permanent was really a bad choice of words, at least from our vantage point. And I just want to say, you know, our community board has worked with the State Liquor Authority for decades now. And it took decades to actually get the State Liquor Authority to impose what we call stipulations. And believe it or not, the stipulations agreements between the eating and drinking establishments and the residents by means of the community board, which acts as an intermediary, that works. And it has started to really work well. And you guys can really learn from that because you guys are such novices right now. And, you know, I really think you need to speak to the State Liquor Authority. I think they have figured it out. We certainly have. And I think that's where you should be headed right now because the idea of permanency is just putting you in a bad position, at least with regards to our community. And I say that we are different. We are not community board 2 in other parts of our fine city. We're a destination location. And right now, we're not so much of a destination location. We are a little bit. Things are coming back. And that's probably more because of the allowance of having outdoor seating for restaurants. You know, the big thing was that everybody had to be seated. That has worked over the summer months because of the good weather that we've had. And so that's very successful for some people. And for other people, it's been drudgery because they don't have the same property or property rights as a corner store has versus someone that's mid-block or someone that's blocked by a hydrant who then ends up blocking the hydrant and creating safety concerns for everybody in the neighborhood, freaking everybody out. It's the same with the heaters, okay? I'm the one that spoke up in the chat about the 10 heaters just 2 doors down from me, okay? I know they do not have permits for those heaters, but the mayor's office announced that it was okay, or it was the lady who's in charge of nightlife announced it to everybody that it was okay, go buy your heaters. So again, it's the message that's being provided that is the problem. And so with that statement, I have one question, okay, and for you folks, and it has to do with insurance. So one of the pitfalls that I brought up in the past about the open dining is who's the city of New York going to create an indemnity agreement where the eating and drinking establishment is required to sign some sort of agreement where they're going to indemnify the city for this use of the public property in case there's a lawsuit or there's a loss, okay? And there are a lot of losses that are brought by people that go to these eating and drinking establishments. And so there's going to be a lack of insurance. Now, I say, yeah, maybe we can fix that with an indemnity agreement, but what insurance company is going to underwrite insurance that covers these particular spots? And I wanted to know whether or not that has been something that's been discussed or thought out. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
So I think that's a really great question about insurance. I don't have a really good answer for you though, but I think that you're definitely addressing something that is really important to consider. As it stands right now, I think what we've instructed individual restaurants to do is just to work with their brokers to see, you know, given the existing situation, how they can amend their policy to make sure that they're protected. For the future and in terms of an agreement with, you know, with individual restaurants and indemnification and insurance, I don't know for certain exactly how that's going to look. Right now, we have a self-certification system that there are legal binding terms and conditions that they have to abide by. So I'm certain that something very similar will exist in the future. Will it have all the items that you just, you know, hit on? I don't necessarily know for certain. One thing I do want to say is that, you know, you all do have a tremendous amount of experience in years doing this. And one thing to think about is that the sidewalk cafe rules took years to formulate to get to a place where people felt, you know, I think a little bit more comfortable. And I think it's definitely a little bit, you know, as we look towards a long-term program, we'll call it, it is, you know, there's definitely going to be sort of hurdles and sort of things to suss out along the way. And I think we look forward to working with all of you and all of your really valuable insights that you're going to bring to the table as we sort of develop this program.
Thank you for responding to that, Kyle. I appreciate it. I appreciate you still being on the call, and you as well, Andrew and Jackie. Next, I'm going to go to Joe Gallagher, who's on the Reopening Working Group Committee.
Thanks, Valerie, and thank you so much for your presentation and all the work you did for tonight's meeting, and to all the community here who speak out and the city officials here. And I just want to second what Bob is saying, and just from I work on the Sidewalk Cafes Committee, where you know, we've become kind of a non-existent in this moment, but I think a lot of what is constructive and productive that happens is in our meetings with operators and with the community. It's their only real chance to speak face-to-face to an operator and to a manager, and you see how important community feedback is at that point. And I think just hearing from the agency, the city agencies, kind of that community input is, you know, basically just not important at this time as the legislation is moved before the city council, is what's infuriated so many people. And I just want to stress the importance of community feedback.
Thanks, Joe, and Bob. Thank you for your testimony, being on this committee, and also being the chair of co-chair of SLA. We also have Donna Raftery is also the co-chair of SLA. So Donna, I don't know if you have any specific questions. I know you've been taking a lot of notes throughout, as have I, but I don't know if you wanted to say anything before I move on to other CB2 members.
Thanks, Valerie. I have so many specific questions, so I think that's my overarching question. And I've got to say, I'm really disappointed that this has been called permanent and not just an extension while we investigate further. CB2 had you know, with this working group, we put together a lot of, I feel, really good points back in June. And no one, to my knowledge, really reached out to see what those suggestions were. I think I read most of the feedback that Valerie forwarded that to the committee. A lot of it was still coming in as we were going to this meeting. I really read a lot of it. And, you know, I've got to say, what you're not hearing tonight, I think because of the way this has been laid out, is how much a lot of people really were enjoying, have been enjoying the outdoor seating when it's handled properly and everything else. And I personally feel upset that you're not hearing that, because everybody is so frustrated right now that this is being moved through in this manner that is causing more grief and anger and everything else, that you're not hearing that there are a lot of people that really liked having a street open. There are a lot of people that really enjoy having this outdoor dining, but there are so many questions that are not answered. 25% of a tent, what does that mean? Who can sit there? All the garbage, when are we going to get that picked up? You know, the points that were raised about the tourists, when they're back, it will be a whole different atmosphere. There are other businesses other than eating and drinking establishments that have been closed, that aren't having anybody help them, that now have restaurants blocking their space, that nobody can see their storefronts, or patrons can't get into their spaces. So just having an overarching conversation about all of this, I think would just be so helpful before it just moves forward. And as everyone's pointed out, all the restaurant operators don't know what to do. You know, they're told to get heaters, or they're told that's allowed, but they have no guidelines. It's cold outside. So I just think it's really a shame that this has been rolled out in this kind of what I feel is a haphazard manner that just puts nobody's happy on any side, when people really, I think a lot of the feedback was people really support this in various ways. So I just wanted to say, I guess that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Donna. Appreciate that. And I'm going to move on to Daniel Miller, who's also who's on the Reopening Working Group Committee, and is also the first vice chair for CB2. So Dan.
Thanks very much, Valerie. You definitely deserve a cup of coffee, so go ahead. I'm not going to be saying anything that is that much different from my fellow committee members, which I agree with all the testimony that everyone said. But and just to keep going on what Donna was saying, we have a wonderful neighborhood, and one that tourists come to visit, and because of its restaurants and culture. And that's what makes our community great. But we also have to remember to keep our community safe, and it has to be pleasant to live in. And so if the two don't mix, we got to figure out a solution that it does mix. So for businesses that don't respect its residents, they don't have any business operating in CB2. They shouldn't. But the businesses that are good operators, we have to give them everything that they need in which to survive so that we still have a great city to live in. So we do have something to work on. And as Zella said something a while ago about enforcement, no enforcement, you can have all the regulations of the world, you don't enforce anything, it's going to become haphazard, like we've heard all of our residents talk about today, whether it's with the garbage and all the things that you put in the 22-page report, Valerie. And that's true. We had spoken about that. We kind of raised all the issues, and it's disappointing that the mayor's office didn't look into these before making new announcements haphazardly. Which has caused all this frustration amongst our residents and to the businesses as well. So my question, I guess, is, Mazzella was talking about, perhaps having a DCA and maybe a New York City open restaurant complaint board, that this has to be something that's active so that residents, if they have complaints, they can go to it and we can fix things quickly. And if during a hearing process, there are more violations that are happening with residents complaining, there has to be a method in which to shut those businesses down so that the ones that are following the rules can succeed. It's not any different from college. If a student disobeys the rules of a campus, they get kicked off campus. The same should be true with restaurants that are bad operators. And to Bob's point, one last point, which is the stipulations, you have to have stipulations in place. And if they're not, if there's no enforcement, then no one will follow any stipulations. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Great points raised. Dan is also a former chair of the Economic Development and Small Business Committee for CB2. And Joe Gallagher, in case that wasn't clear before, is also on the committee along with Dan. Joe is also the chair of the Quality of Life Committee. So we have the best of the best on CB2, I think, on this committee, and lots of active board members here that I'm going to move to your questions next. So Cormac, you're going to have to unmute.
Yes. And first of all, I resent saying that, the best of the best are all on the committee, since I'm not. No, but the look, we've talked a lot about the process tonight. I mean, I agree with almost everything I've heard tonight. But I'd like to, there's so much I could say, and it's the hour's late and there are other people to talk. So really what I actually want to do is talk for just a minute about the impact again, and just from a personal perspective of the impact as I have experienced it. I'm not going to stand up and claim to speak for the whole community. Right? So I live in the apartment that I was brought home from the hospital to when I was born. And I can tell you that the noise issues that I'm having now are among the worst I've experienced in my lifetime. Certainly, like the big motorcycle thing, 15 years ago and things, was a lot worse noise and more random, but it was also for short bursts and not for hours at a time. It's not just the clamor of the crowd, which is bad enough, but there's the music. I got brass band quartets outside. I got amplified jazz singers. I got, strolling buskers and people who set up their own little stages and just stay. I have restaurants who put speakers and things outside, right? And the thing is that all of this is, I'm told, theoretically against the rules, and yet apparently none of it is enforceable, and none of it is anybody's responsibility. And not only that, but nobody, or most nobody, even wants to enforce it when you go to them. It's not even like they're like, I really wish I could help. I mean, except for the bid, nobody else actually, they're like, they don't want to enforce any of these rules. That's a whole enforcement problem that I won't get. So on the evenings of like Friday and Saturday evenings now, and sometimes on Thursdays, you know, during the open dining when the street's closed and crowds are at their biggest, oftentimes you will find me now sitting in the back of my apartment in my kitchen or my bathroom reading, because I cannot watch television or work at my computer in the front of the apartment because the noise from the street for those hours is bad. Now, it does stop at the appointed hour. I should say that my street is better managed than many because it's right in the middle of a bid, right? And it's well, and it does stop, but the noise is bad. And you know, this is with, you know, half the places haven't opened because they haven't survived COVID, right? Half the restaurant space on my block are shut. This is with the fact that many of them are not even filled to capacity because people are still not that big on coming out. It's people going out there aren't tourists. When I think about that, you know, as a temporary emergency measure, I can live with this. You know, like we're all in this together. I want to help them. I want to help the people who work at the restaurants. I mean, yeah, I can put up with a few hours of that, a couple of days a week. I'll build my life around it. But as a permanent thing, that is a permanent reduction in my quality of life. It is permanent impingement upon the habitability of my apartment if this sort of, if it continues under the current arrangements and the reality of what goes on. And I know that I'm not the only one. I mean, I've talked to old ladies in tears on my phone from my block over the thing, right? And, you know, another thing that I want to point out about it is that it really is exacerbating the distance between the haves and the have-nots. People who live in luxury apartments high up, right, who have central air and climate control and have, you know, quiet windows and things like that, it doesn't bother them as much as the people like the woman we heard from earlier who live, you know, close to the ground, who live in old buildings, right, who have limited means. I happen to know, just because before this all happened, as it happened, I had contractors do estimates on my apartment for the sort of, you know, improvements that I would need, the retrofit. And I even had David Gruber send, you know, me to people who gave me good deals. I'll tell you the total bill for everything was nearly $40,000. People, a lot of people cannot afford that. So this policy exacerbates the economic inequalities in the city or in our neighborhood, as well as people pointed out before, the climate ones, right? And that does something else too, which is that, going back to process a minute, you know, for probably 70 years or more, there have been people, activists who worked on this block, former block association president, who worked on this block to make sure that there were no sidewalk cafes on this block. There is a special zoning district that runs for a couple of blocks that does not allow sidewalk cafes and open uses. That includes this block. That local elected officials, in response to community, created more than half a century ago. The sidewalks on my street are exactly 6 inches too short for sidewalk cafes, specifically because in case that they took back the zoning, people wanted to make sure you still couldn't have sidewalk cafes, right? And so that was negotiated. I remember those meetings. I was much younger, right? 200 people and things would show up. My point is, you might think it's a good thing or a bad thing about cafes on my block. That isn't at all what matters. What matters is that the arrangements on the block have been worked out over years of work with elected officials, with bid people, with community volunteers, with the community board, with the restaurants and industry and real estate interests, the owners, everybody. You worked out things, and then just with a stroke, it's all gone. Just with a stroke. None of that matters. The years of work and toil and community work. What does that say about democracy? Right? How is that in any sense fair? Right? And that, you know, and I want to, there was something earlier that was said that I want to go back to, that I think Laura said it when she said it was Trumpian. That was actually the word that came to me too. I mean, I want people to just think about this for a minute about on the process side. Do a mind experiment. If Dick Cheney, right, and Mitch McConnell, rather than the mayor, right, proposed something like this to help the oil and gas industry, right? A proposal that ran roughshod over local governance and years of local policy and rules and regulation, that increased inequality, right? That fell most heavily on the most vulnerable, that was bad for the environment and the climate, right? And if they did that, what would we say about that then? And to look at now, when we're in the middle of the COVID crisis, and to try to push through, this is the most transformative proposal for Greenwich Village since Robert Moses proposed the Lower West Side Expressway, right? Because this is, whether you think it's going to be a good outcome or not, it's going to be transformative, right? And to propose this and then try to push this through as a fait accompli when we're in the middle of this crisis, when the community, people are worried about their own health, they're worried about their family, they're burying people. People are not here because even though they are villagers and they love the place, they have been, forced to protect their children, to decamp to other places. When all of this is going on, to sort of take this opportunity to rush through this wholesale, dramatic, sweeping change that will transform your community without your community even having more than token input. Listen, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult, but that's just corrupt. And that's all I have to say, except I want to say one last thing, right? I mean, there's a lot I could say, but I'm not going to. One last thing. Because I know there are representatives from local officials here. Let me just say this. You can go back to your local officials and tell them at least one person in this community is of the opinion, of the definite opinion, that anyone who supports this and says they're a progressive is bullshit. Thank you.
Thank you, Cormac. Janet Liff, Janet is the current chair of the Economic Development and Small Business Committee. Janet?
Hi, thank you. And I do obviously live in this neighborhood, spend a lot of time, know a lot of people who support it. My question for DOT is, the community board can do what it does, but we only reach maybe 10% of the community. I mean, unfortunately, it's open to everybody, but our listserv is not comprehensive. Will you be doing your own survey of, your own surveys and investigation to get perhaps a more complete picture? Are you guys still here? Andrew?
I know that Kyle in the comments said that he had to leave from DOT, but I believe Jackie is listening and she's unmuted, so I'm not sure if she's going to chime in or not. And Andrew is still on.
You're asking if DOT would conduct surveys?
Yeah, because the community board does its best, but we only can reach the people who have actually connected with the community board to an extent. So I think our listserv is perhaps 10% of the community. So it would be beneficial for you to do your own outreach and not just rely on kind of who shows up.
Let me see. Okay, so I actually don't know if we are doing our own outreach, but I will take that back and get back to the board regarding that.
Okay. Yeah, and I know it's been particularly hard, but I just want to say it has, I think, saved our neighborhood certainly for the time being. Where it goes in the future has to be worked out, but I kind of hats off to DOT for being so agile and creating this, so immediately. I admire it. Thank you. That's my only question.
Hey, Janet, Andrew Kunkus here. SBS, the Small Business Service, is doing surveys of businesses for what their various needs are, how the city may be able to help, to get a broader understanding of how the program's working and what can be done to help it. I'm not quite sure if it's similar to the survey that you guys did in CB2, but I can certainly follow up and find out. And also, I'm going to ask Valerie to send over a copy of that, the PowerPoint survey that she sent over, that she displayed earlier, so I can share that with my colleagues specifically for CB2.
Okay, but I also recommend, I think you should do your, I mean, in order to, you know, I think you have the resources to do your own community outreach so that you can reach beyond the people who happen to be engaged with the community board. That's 80% of the public does not engage with the community board. So I think it's important to, you know, hit the streets yourselves and talk to people.
Oh yeah, I have conversations every single day with various stakeholders, with residents, with business owners and whatnot. But yeah, we can certainly do, see what more broad-based community outreach my office can do to get this information.
Yeah, I think that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Janet. Next, we're going to go to CB2 board member Michael Levine.
Hi, thank you. This has been a very, very excellent meeting, and I do appreciate all the effort that went into pulling it together. So I will be brief in my comments. I am a member, a very happy member of Joe Gallagher's Quality of Life Committee, but we have not had very many sidewalk cafe applications this past year. Business has been slow, and that leads me to my main comment. I'm going to quote something that Zella said in her comments earlier tonight, and a few people have reiterated what Zella said. This whole process perhaps should be in the hands of a different agency. And she had recommended considering the Department of Consumer Affairs, which has, number one, very strict regulations before an application can enter into the public review process. And perhaps we should be looking at who should be managing this process in the future. DOT has set the wheels going for the process, but an agency that's very well familiar with rules and regulations regarding use of the sidewalk perhaps should be in charge of this process, because they do promulgate very strict rules and regulations which must be adhered to before an application is entered into the public review process. And that leads me to my second point. The Department of Consumer Affairs, in managing the process of approval of sidewalk cafes, always follows a timeline for community involvement. And that seems to be something that everyone here has objected to tonight, that there has been no community involvement in the establishment of sidewalk and roadway dining. So I think this community board and I think this working group should consider, is there a way that we can work into a resolution or our recommendations to the city administration that this process, when it becomes either temporary or permanent, should be managed by an agency like the Department of Consumer Affairs, which is very, very familiar with establishing and maintaining rules and regulations and in involving community input. I think that would be a major recommendation that most people would be happy with while we consider whether or not this is a temporary or permanent open streets dining proposal. Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much. And thank you for reminding me what committees you sit on. I do not have that memorized, so thank you.
My pleasure. The other committee is land use. Just
yes, so that I knew. That one I knew. Thank you.
Thank you.
William Benesh, who is also a CB2 board member.
Hi, thanks, Valerie. And I would just echo everyone else's comments, thanking everyone for joining and contributing to this meeting. I just wanted to say that I do think it is a shame that we didn't have more operators join tonight. I do thank Vittorio for putting his input in the chat, and I think it's partially due just to the simple fact, perhaps, that our meetings coincide with prime dinner hours, maybe. But in any case, I think we all agree that they're a valued and pivotal part of our community, and that we should continue to get their input. That being said, I live at 10th Street and 6th Avenue. And I've been talking to a number of the restaurant operators along 6th Avenue and Greenwich Avenue for the last couple of months. And I think when it comes down to it, for the most part, business operators are on the same page as residents. in terms of what they want from the city. They want guidance from the city in the same way that residents want guidance. You know, they want communication and dialogue in the same way that residents want communication and dialogue. And in fact, they want enforcement in the same way that residents want enforcement. You know, I've talked to a number of operators that look at those that are, you know, trying their hardest to abide by all of the regulations, even when they're, you know, made public at the last minute. And then they look at other operators in the neighborhood who are just ignoring those regulations and are able to fit more people in than they should, or using music or live music to attract more patrons. And it's not fair to those that are trying to play by the rules. So I would say that even a lot of the operators I've talked to are sharing the same concerns with regard to enforcement. So I just wanted to make that point, because I know we didn't necessarily hear from the operator side of things, but I don't think it's this, I don't think there's necessarily that much difference when it comes down to those key points. So I just wanted to give that input.
Thank you so much, Will. I know I was muted there for a second. Every survey, I just like to speak to that point. Every survey does always have a bias and as to who it's distributed to. And so I invite everyone on this call, whether you're a CB2 board member, whether you're on this committee, whether you're a resident, whether you're an operator, I'm going to share both links. What I presented tonight were preliminary results. I welcome, the board welcomes feedback from people that support this program in the survey. And so I put that back on to anyone that's on this call to share those links with people that do support the program, and especially CB2 board members. I'm gonna share that right now. If there are no other CB2 board member feedback, we're gonna move into business session quickly. I know that we are on the hour soon, so I would like to move along to business session. This means that we will no longer take comments from the public or from other board members that are not on the committee. So Bob, Joe, Dan, Donna, would anyone like to kick it off as to how we move forward here based on what we've heard? And if not, I can, but okay. I mean, it sounds like based on what we've heard tonight, that it sounds like, sorry, there's noise outside my apartment. It sounds like we need a strongly worded resolution package that goes back to everyone that we wrote to back in June, that summarizes the testimony that we've heard here tonight, whether that's through the written testimony that we've seen from the spoken testimony tonight, and couched with the feedback, sorry, I got a message, couched with the feedback from the agency representatives tonight. It's the word permanent that is really the issue here. There are plenty of people on this call who do support this program and want it to be a success, but have felt left out of the process. So it's the permanence and the lack of enforcement that is are really kind of the really big issues here. And our response needs to reflect what we've heard here tonight from the community, from what we've seen, from the submitted photos and videos. And it also sounds as though we have some educating of our own to do, and knowing the people on this committee that know the SLA process and how DOT and SLA could work together as a recommendation. Donna, you had your hand up?
I was going to say the enforcement, and then you just said that word, but I've got to say, one of my pet peeves through this whole thing has been that 8 feet of clearance and all the tables that are on the curbside. And the diagram that they have is quite simple. Reading all the crap is not, but the diagram is very simple. And the one thing that's quite clear on that diagram is the 8 feet from the seats that are by the building to the curbside. If that were enforced, if that little piece were actually enforced, I bet you half of the responses you got about people not being able to walk down a sidewalk would have been eliminated. And the fact that this program has been going on for as long as it has, and that simple thing that's not about people wearing a mask, it's not about people standing on street corners, is so easy in my mind and so non-confrontational to enforce, and that hasn't been enforced. I just don't understand how they're going to do anything with any of this if that one basic thing can't be enforced. And that would have eliminated 3/4 of the comments you got, I think, on all of this. So I think enforcement needs to be really strong in this resolution, and the lack of it, of what we've seen so far. The music is another thing. We all know about that, and it was really disappointing to hear what we heard today. I also think, Valerie, like I said before, a lot of people really expressed how much they like this program and getting it to work right and getting it to fit right. And I think it's important that's expressed in the resolution, that we want to, we want to make this work. Some of the comments I saw in the chat had to do with all of our areas being different. It's not a one size fits all. So all of this needs to be thought about, and it seems like nobody's really looking at it that way. So if we can encourage them to do so, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you. And yeah, on the music and the buskers and the it's hard when when you're in your apartment also to know whether something's is that a busker. I mean, I don't know. I hear it on Hudson, so that's also really tough. And it needs to be addressed too, because we also are then having operators that are saying, oh, I didn't hire them, and that's not going to cut it.
But you have the speakers. I mean, the speakers, people are putting huge speakers in their doorways to face out. So they're inside, but they're facing out. They're hiding them in all the planters. And the other thing, which is my other pet peeve, aside from the 8 feet that nobody mentioned, is, social distancing is 6 feet apart. Tables being 6 feet apart is not people being 6 feet apart. By the time you put a chair there and you put somebody in the chair, you're lucky if those chairs are 2 feet apart. So, I just don't understand how standing, you're supposed to be 6 feet apart, but tables are supposed to be 6 feet apart. It's a totally different guideline for eating versus if you're standing around. If we were standing outside, people would say you should be 6 feet apart. When you're eating, the table is 6 feet apart. People are not 6 feet apart then. And inside tents, I don't even get how that is working. So.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, and I think, to someone in the comment that's saying, shouldn't, what your point about one size fits all, it doesn't work for us. It does, one size fit all, as you said, Donna, it does not work for us, and that we need a forum for the exceptions. There's no process for a variance at all with this process where we could get this input in an expeditious way. I'm going to call on Dan Miller next.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. I believe that we should try to keep it simple. And there's no agency to go to. There's no complaint review board. And that's why there's no enforcement. So until they actually have an agency in which can act on complaints, there will be no enforcement. So all the points were really good, Donna, and quality of life can only come back if we can actually institute enforcement. But we need to create that agency. And Bob can talk about how the SLA enforces rules that are broken and closes places down. You need the same kind of structure.
Thank you.
We also don't know the clarity on this bill yet because it was just changed in the last very short time period to include some different elements. And one of those elements that I haven't seen it yet, but it looks like the sidewalk portion will return to the new agency that's replaced DCA. And to Joe's, Joe, I don't think we've had that many complaints about sidewalk cafes when they've had proper diagrams and stuff like that, right? It's very few and far between that there are really issues. And with better guidance from the city, and even if they were self-certified plots of those areas with where tables and chairs go, would really, you know, reduce these issues because everybody would be on the same page. And DOT just doesn't seem to have the capacity at this point to do that. But that's ultimately what needs to be done if any program is going to be made permanent. I mean, I don't, maybe that's something, Joe, you can talk to a little bit more just in your experience looking at all the plans over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think when those rules and regulations are set out, you know, the restaurants hire basically an architect to come up with their plan for their sidewalk cafe, and then that is submitted to DCA. And then it comes to DCA says, okay, well, based on your plans, it looks like this should be okay. And now you have to go for your community input. And that's really where a lot of things get noticed or ironed out. Community members, residents and other businesses who live nearby know the sidewalk in and out and can say, well, DCA didn't notice this, but this is actually, you know, a hydrant right here that you don't have on your plans. And that's when the applicant really notices those things and then refines their plans and brings them back to DCA for their hearing at DCA or the city council. So yeah, I mean, I think when there's clear regulations, clear rules, other businesses don't feel like they're at a disadvantage by following the rules, you know, because they know that everyone is playing by the same rules and enforcement is going to happen. And so I think that's really where a lot of the issues that we heard about tonight are recognized before a cafe is approved.
One of the other legislative pieces that was wrapped up in what we originally had listed on our website is 2020-6677. That was a local law to amend the administrative code in relation to preparing the plans in connection with petitions for revocable consents for sidewalk cafes. Basically, they wanted to remove the requirement for having an architect draw up the plans to reduce the cost for the applicants, to sort of streamline it. You think that would be okay in conjunction with still having the community input? Or, you know, it seems to me that, I don't know if this is still in play. I assume it is because it's a significant cost to applicants.
No, I mean, I can see how that could be a concern with a new business getting off the ground to feel like they have to hire an architect to draw a sidewalk cafe plan, but it really is someone that needs to know how to read city regulations, which, you know, that's a separate issue. Those should be easier to understand, but not everyone knows what you know, and Bob Gormley, our district manager, is really an expert on all this because he worked at DCA for a long time. So he notices a lot of these issues, but business owners don't have the time to know whether a standpipe is the same as a fire hydrant or is the same as a postal box or a bike rack. But they're all things that have rules around them and clearance requirements around them. And it does take someone with some sort of knowledge of these things to be able to create a sidewalk cafe. I mean, you see it on what everyone is concerned about with the fire hydrant that's being blocked. That business owner, I mean, you would hope that they would know that that would be something that they can't have, but sometimes it takes someone with more knowledge to tell them you can't have something blocking that fire hydrant. You can't even have something 8 feet within around that fire hydrant or that postal box. So there, yeah, I think there's a better way to deal with that than just removing that requirement entirely.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna get into something in just a second, but Jackie, if you're still on, I do want to ask you a question about what happens when someone does a 311 complaint. If you can unmute, if you could answer, like somebody, you know, we've heard a lot of residents tonight that have said they've filed a 311. What happens to that complaint right now?
Okay, so from my understanding, when calls are made in to 311 about open restaurants and open outdoor dining, 311 then sends that complaint to the appropriate agency depending on what the call is relating to. So different agencies address different issues.
And then from there, it's then up to the agency whether or not they actually go on site to address it or to enforce it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. these are all really great comments from the committee and how we should move forward. And I also want to put forth that with the upcoming budget, budgeting that the board is doing, that our committee, we will be contributing a district, a paragraph or two to the district needs statement, since so much of what has happened over the last 6 months, 7 months, and what's going to happen move forward is all kind of through this lens of reopening. So I will be circulating that to the committee for edit review, and that's.
So do we want to do a similar letter to what we did in June and just sort of follow up on that, using that as a basis of these were the initial concerns? Here's what we're hearing now. Here's some thoughts on the different elements.
Yeah, I
haven't seen all the details yet, so it's hard to.
Yeah, it's hard when we don't know what some of that guidance that hasn't been released yet. But we also can't wait either, because there's decisions being made, and this program is being shaped, you know, day by day. So it sounds like, you know, I'm going to ask the committee: is it you know, is it a letter? Is it a resolution? I'd entertain comments from the committee on that.
Is it both?
That's what I was going to say. It's like time is of the essence, and whatever is going to get them to them fastest or have the most impact.
We could send a letter based on a resolution and then attach the resolution. The letter may give more background around the issues. I mean, it would seem that the idea of permanent is really the main concern. I'm not sure there's any objection to continuing this program through, you know, the end of next year. Correct me if I'm wrong. You know, and as we move into next season with more clarity on what the rules are, and, you know, some sort of plan as far as enforcement. I mean, it's not that different than what we laid out in June. You know, and I know the elected officials office for the city council members and our community board has spent an inordinate amount of time just dealing with, you know, lack of clarity and people deciding the rules don't apply to them, or they do apply, or, you know, that's what we want to avoid, right? So that's what everybody can understand. When there's an enforcement mechanism that allows the rules to, you know, be enforced, it's.
You know, I would just kind of echo what Dan said to keep it simple. In terms of enforcement, you need a law. And then you need an agency to enforce the law. And right now we have neither. So, and there's no plan in place to do that. The only real regulations that exist are, you know, can't have an open container, and they're not being enforced. And so I'm just saying, you know, you got to keep it simple, because, you know, enforcement's great, but how are they going to do it?
I mean, so do we want to do a letter with all, you know, the attachments of what summarizes people as addendums, a letter that just basically describes what would be in a resolution with that in mind? I mean, I think all the testimony is important, just summarizing that, because those are people's experiences, you know, with real examples of what, you know, is occurring on the ground. Our community is very unique in that we have, from the smallest residential streets to the, you know, huge avenues, and the situations is different for each of those. And we still have the underlying equity issue for restaurants that just can't participate in this program based on where they're located. And that doesn't seem fair either. I mean, this just goes back to the same thing we were saying in the beginning. And they should be working harder on the exceptions for us, because we have so many exceptions. And that's where we want to be involved. because we're not opposed to exceptions if, you know, there's some community input, I would think, you know, in those cases. It's, it seems to me that's why the input is important. So you can say, hey, this isn't infringing on the community to do this, and we support this. Or if, you know, something else may be, I don't know. That's,
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like the committee wants to do something that is expeditious and simple. And maybe by doing both a letter and a resolution, that's going to complicate it. So it sounds like we're leaning towards a letter that I'll draft and circulate to the committee for edit. And then it will be presented at full board.
I think we need a resolution though, if we want the board to take a position on that we're not to be permanent yet. And also, you know, look, I mean, we've said this from the beginning. If they have anything they want to bring to it, we'll review anything, anytime, as quickly as possible, you know, to the extent of even rescheduling meetings. I mean, I think everybody was in agreement with that back in June. And I think everybody understands how important this is now, that we would be willing to do that in the short term. I mean, is that, I don't know, am I speaking out of turn in saying that?
No, I think that's right. A resolution has to occur, and the time is not necessarily of the essence. It's going to happen whether we provide input in the next 2 days. This is not an emergency situation really for us, because they're not listening to us.
Right. That's a good point.
Sorry, but we do have something to say, and it does matter. It's just not going to matter by Thursday.
Okay. All right. I think I have everything.
So everybody in agreement on that?
Yeah, is everyone in agreement on that? I've seen a lot of nodded heads, so. Great. Thanks, guys. Dan, I can't.
Yes, I agree, if you could hear.
Okay.
I think a resolution is a good way to go.
Okay, there you go.
On it. And timing isn't of the essence because they've already acted without us.
Right. Thank you. You're right. Yes, you guys are all right. Okay. All right. As far as like the district needs statement, is there any overarching theme that off the top of your heads, you know, thinking holistically beyond just open restaurants, that you think we should be addressing? And then we'll cut it off at that. And if not, you can email me. All right.
I think one of the important things is as we move into a period of a lot of uncertainty, is we need a lot of room, as we've seen with open restaurants, for experimentation with things, where there can be things that are perhaps, you know, worked out, but ultimately we still need enforcement, and, you know, of whatever the rules may be, because that's what creates a level playing field. And I've heard from so many operators, I'm following the rules, I'm following the rules, I'm following the rules. Look at that guy, nothing's happening, and look how much money he's making. And, you know, that's not a level playing field, and that's not healthy for our community going forward. Certainly not healthy for the conversations landlords have to have with their tenants, or tenants have to have with their landlords. You know, obviously there's going to be a correction on retail ground floor rents. Nobody knows where that's going to go. You know, we're a long way off from even figuring that out. There's a lot of thoughts on what that might be, but in the pathway through that, we do need to have some certainty, and that's the rules that are in place. And if the rules aren't working, change them. You know, that's not the issue. It's just not having a level playing field. And that's also why we want equity, you know, for a place that's not on the corner, that is a small spot up front, that isn't a triangle location that has a 10-foot, you know, frontage and tons of seats inside, and they can't have any seats outside. So.
Right. And then what does it mean again for those, you know, we did hear from some retailers that feel left out of the adjacent property process. And, you know, there's other lines of industry that are affected by this. So, all right, with that.
There was one other point I just want to bring up, just so that we've talked about it. So we got one very interesting letter. I don't know if you guys read it, from a business owner, a retail business owner next door to a restaurant. And the property owner was also the property owner for the adjoining space, which was a restaurant. And they gave them permission to extend in front of the retail business. And the retail business owner felt very put upon with that, in that there's suddenly a restaurant right out in front of their business, and really doesn't help with their, operating their business. And I thought that was a very compelling point, and it's something that I don't know. I didn't look back at the rules since seeing that letter this afternoon, if the storefront has to be vacant for a business to extend in front, but if not, the rule probably should be the property owner and the business owner sign off on a restaurant using that space in front of them. Just a thought.
That is not, yeah, the vacancy is not outlined on the DOT site for adjacent properties with that update. And I do recall that letter as well, and it was a clothing boutique that was now saying that their customers were now coming out of a dressing room and kind of being on display for the people that are eating right outside the window. So with that, go ahead, Donna.
Well, I just want to say that letter really stood out for me. I learned so much from that letter, and it wasn't even that long letter. And the other thing, it goes to the equity issue. And the other one is some of these people I know in meatpacking, that the same property owner owns a whole row of buildings. So it's a lot easier for them to be able to get access to going up and down a good part of the street than it is for somebody else that's in a small place that the same property owner doesn't own everything next door. They don't have a good relationship going back years. So it's a whole other equity issue.
Right. Thank you for that, Donna. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Move.
Thank you, Dan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Was that Joe? Okay, you came on really quickly and I didn't catch it. All right, so with that, we're going to join this October meeting of the CB2 Reopening Working Group. Thank you to all of the feedback from residents, operators, community groups, bids, etc. Thank you so much for your time on this call. For elected official reps, for our agency panelists, thank you for sticking through with us and for being so responsive on this call and for sharing your contact information. Going to end this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you to all the attendees. I know most of you guys on here, so thank you very much for sticking through this all. And certainly feel free to send us emails about what you think, because we really do want to hear your input. So thanks.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the other CB2 board members for your input this evening, and to the committee as well. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you.